Xian was born into a world where being weak doesn't just cost you your money, it costs you your life. Buried alive in the unforgiving sand, he reaches out in pure desperation, realizing just how cruel this reality truly is. A colossal, terrifying maw erupts from the earth to swallow him whole, proving his point in the most brutal way possible. But to understand how things got this bad, we have to look back a century, to the exact moment a blinding beam of light struck the earth. The mysterious energy didn't just hit the surface. It rapidly expanded, devouring absolutely every living creature in its path. Everything humanity had ever built was completely erased in a single, overwhelming flash of white. When the glow finally faded, the once vibrant blue planet had been reduced to nothing more than a massive barren desert grave. To survive this gritty, yellow-skied nightmare, the remaining scraps of humanity had absolutely no choice but to weld together colossal fortresses just to stay alive. Inside one of these massive convoys, our hero sits with his arms crossed, openly frustrated that whatever destroyed the world left so much human garbage behind. Before he can even finish his thought, a massive tattooed fist slams directly into his face out of nowhere. Flashing a mouthful of sharp teeth and a tongue piercing, the attacker mockingly claims his hand just slipped. Towering over him, the blonde thug sarcastically demands to know his victim's name so he can offer a proper apology. Glaring up at the giant with absolute defiance, he finally speaks up, revealing his name is Xian. Cruel laughter erupts across the vehicle as the brute mocks Xian for only having a first name, calling him a fatherless bastard. Xian stays dead silent, his eyes darkening with cold fury as he reveals that every single piece of trash on this mind-bound bus shares one fatal flaw. Slapping a heavy arm around Xian's shoulders, the blonde thug aggressively demands to know what crime landed him on this transport, since it's obvious nobody here is actually holding a pickaxe. Completely unfazed by the heavy arm weighing him down, our hero just lowers his gaze and coldly starts rattling off the brute's likely rap sheet, calculating whether it was assault, fraud, or theft that turned him into a fugitive. But instead of answering, our boy snaps his fist upward, delivering a brutal, bone-crunching strike straight to the bully's jaw. The sheer force of the blow sends the massive thug hurtling backward down the narrow aisle, leaving the rest of the passengers absolutely stunned. Rising slowly to his feet, Bro glares down at the crumpled giant and coldly offers to correct the man's wild guesses about his criminal record. With a dark, piercing stare, he makes it terrifyingly clear that he's on this bus for murder. That dark memory hits him instantly, pulling us back to the rain-slicked streets of Neo Seoul, a dystopian nightmare where only the strong were even considered human. Standing over a lifeless white-haired thief in a cluttered alleyway, our hero rationalized the kill, viewing the trespasser as nothing more than another piece of trash in the slums. Unfortunately, the dying thief's final sputtering threats revealed a fatal complication. The punk was the younger brother of a notoriously dangerous figure. Just hearing the name Lee Jaeryong was enough to completely drain the color from Xian's face. He knew that in this brutal hierarchy, awakeners weren't just powerful elites. They were literal gods walking among mortals, wielding terrifying elemental abilities. Deep despair settled into his eyes as he realized his simple act of self-defense had just provoked an untouchable deity. Driven by pure survival instinct, he had fled the city the moment the rumors started, desperately buying a one-way ticket to the deadly mines just to escape the Awakener's wrath. Jolted out of the grim flashback by a sudden voice, Xian snaps his attention back to the present reality of the armored transport. Wiping a stream of blood from his nose, the blonde brute cracks his knuckles with a sinister grin, signaling that his little power nap on the floor is officially over. Staring down at his suddenly bleeding hand, Xian barely has a second to process the impossible before a massive fist connects with his face. The sheer force of the strike launches our hero backward, sending him tumbling head over heels down the narrow aisle. Crashing hard against the metal floor, he lets out an agonized scream as the impact rattles every bone in his body. Looming over him, the blonde brute casually cracks his knuckles and taunts that they're both here for the same dark purpose. But Xian just made a fatal mistake. Absolute terror grips our boy's face as the horrifying realization sets in. He fled to the ends of the earth to escape the awakened, only to be trapped in a metal box with one. Radiating a suffocating crimson aura, the giant proudly flexes his supernatural status to the terrified crowd, ready to deliver a brutal lesson. Before another blow can land, a violent bone-rattling jolt rips through the transport, throwing everyone completely off balance. Outside, the massive armored vehicle violently skids out of control, kicking up a massive cloud of dust as it crashes into the wasteland. Inside the chaotic cabin, a bleeding passenger furiously screams at the front, demanding to know what the driver is doing. But the man behind the wheel isn't responding to the outrage, sitting completely slumped over the controls and muttering under his breath. Marching up to demand answers, the angry survivor suddenly freezes in his tracks as he finally hears what the broken man is saying. Gazing blankly through the shattered windshield, the delirious driver repeats a chilling truth. this transport was never heading to the deadly mines. All the rage instantly drains from the passenger's face, replaced by pure unadulterated dread as the implications sink in. Tears stream down the driver's terrified face as he looks up into the abyss and chokes out their actual horrifying destination. Bursting from the earth with rows of razor-sharp teeth, a colossal nightmare-inducing sandworm swallows the entire bus whole. Trapped inside the beast's cavernous maw, the doomed passengers are violently tossed around like ragdolls in a storm of twisted metal. Plummeting into the dark abyss, our hero's life flashes before his eyes, and the memory hits him. A bitter realization that his existence has always been a repeating loop of misery. Back when he was just a starving kid in the alleys of Neo Seoul, he learned that being crushed by awakened or swallowed by monsters was just the natural order of things. Even as the memory fades into the crushing reality of the monster's stomach, Zeon accepts the cruel rule of this world. The strong devour the weak without hesitation. A single tear mixes with the grime on his face as the grim truth settles deep into his bones. Reaching desperately toward the fading light, our boy curses his own powerlessness, blaming his impending doom entirely on his own pathetic weakness. The massive jaws snap shut, plunging him into pitch blackness while he bitterly mocks his own cliché fantasy of somehow being strong enough to survive this nightmare. Silence falls over the suffocating darkness, leaving only a single motionless hand protruding from the beast's internal dunes. For a long, agonizing moment, everything is completely still, until the loose earth around his buried fingers begins to subtly shift. Blood drips from his battered knuckles as the granular surface trembles, threatening to drag him even further into the abyss. Without warning, the ground gives way entirely, forming a treacherous sinkhole that violently sucks his remaining limb down into the depths. But deep within that suffocating grave, a spark ignites, and Zeon's golden eyes snap wide open with terrifying clarity. Exploding upward through the heavy soil, Bro breaches the surface like a drowning man, desperately hauling oxygen into his burning lungs. Covered in filth and trembling from the sheer shock of survival, he clutches his chest, struggling to process the fact that his heart is still beating. Something impossible is happening beneath his skin. A blinding, mysterious energy surges through his very skeleton, rewriting his nervous system from the inside out. Suddenly, current condition of the world flashes in his mind. The first thing Zeon sees is a massive broken stone face half buried in the endless dunes. His golden eyes widen in absolute disbelief while his racing heartbeat drowns out the silence of the desert. Rising from the barren landscape is the rusted, shattered skeleton of the Eiffel Tower, a grim monument to a fallen civilization. Beyond it lies an entire metropolis swallowed by the earth, shadowed by a colossal dark obelisk piercing the dead sky. The sheer scale of the devastation reflects in our hero's trembling pupils. Colossal chunks of ancient architecture drift and crumble through a sickly golden atmosphere, defying gravity itself. Breath escapes his dirt-caked lips in ragged gasps, completely unable to articulate the nightmare unfolding before him. This isn't just a localized disaster. The entire planet has been fractured, ringed by a catastrophic halo of its own debris. Suddenly, a blinding flash of raw energy mirrors in his gaze, snapping him out of his paralyzed stupor. Channeling the mysterious power now coursing through his veins, Bro thrusts his hand forward and unleashes a devastating sandblaster. That torrential beam of force slams directly into a gargantuan subterranean worm that erupts from the wasteland to claim him. Foul dark blood splatters across the jagged rocks as our guy makes a silent ironclad vow to stay alive. Drenched in the monster's viscera, Zeon stares down at his own trembling hands, acknowledging the cursed reality of this sand-drowned planet. Standing tall amidst the relentless dust storms, he refuses to let this apocalyptic hellscape become his grave. With a fierce, unnatural glow igniting in his eyes, he makes it clear. He won't just survive this new world, he'll conquer it. Staring up at the colossal, gaping maw of the subterranean beast, Zeon screams his defiance into the wasteland. A sudden, rhythmic pulse echoes through his veins as raw energy crackles around his arms, every cell in his body responding to the threat. Clenching his glowing fist, our hero realizes this isn't just an adrenaline rush. It's a full-blown awakening of his latent power. But the monstrous worm doesn't care about his power-up, rearing its grotesque head as foul liquid drips from its jaws. With a deafening roar, the creature lunges straight down, aiming to crush the tiny human under its massive weight. Instead of running, Bro holds his ground right in the shadow of those razor-sharp teeth, daring the beast to try its luck. Out of absolutely nowhere, a mysterious man in a trench coat grabs Zeon by the collar, coldly telling him he's in the way of the real test. Wide-eyed and completely caught off guard, the newly awakened survivor can't even process what is happening. With a single effortless toss, the stranger sends Zeon hurtling backward through a massive cloud of dust and debris. The sheer force of the impact sends him crashing violently into the dunes, tearing a ragged scream from his throat. Coughing up a mouthful of foul dark sludge, Zeon struggles to his knees, completely baffled by the impossible speed of the attack that just leveled him. His jaw practically hits the floor as he stares through the settling dust, completely stunned by the sheer speed of the newcomer. A sickening splash of dark, viscous monster blood paints the nearby rocks, while the stranger casually complains about the creature's nasty, watery insides. High above the chaotic dunes, a mysterious man in a gray coat stands calmly with his arms crossed, a massive sword already buried deep into the beast's flesh. Unbothered by the carnage below, The stranger casually raises his leg to kick his embedded blade deeper, pondering if he should descend to finish the job. The battlefield shakes violently as a massive shockwave of dust and kinetic force erupts downwards. Bracing against the violent winds, Xian can barely process the sheer, overwhelming power he just witnessed. As the mysterious stranger casually complains about his sword being stuck in the monster, our hero realizes he's looking at a true awakened. Out of nowhere, a blue-haired woman pops up beside him, cheerfully introducing the powerhouse as their captain, Jang Yongbum. Leaning in close, she boasts about her captain's record-breaking speed, leaving our boy completely bewildered by her sudden silent arrival. Yet while he marvels at Yongbum's incredible strength, a sudden terrifying realization hits Xian. His own bandaged arm is turning freezing cold. Unbothered by the dead worm, the captain sternly addresses the cheerful girl, calling her Giselle as she clings tightly to Bro's freezing arm. Yongbum shoots her a deadpan serious glare, clearly not in the mood for games. He flat out orders her to cut it out, but Giselle just laughs, squeezing her new toy even tighter. With a cheeky grin, she throws up a playful salute, completely ignoring the gravity of the situation. In a flash, her demeanor shifts, and she abruptly yanks Xian backward off his feet. Before he can even react, she effortlessly overpowers him, pinning him hard against the dirt. Treating it all like a game show, she holds up his afflicted arm, demanding a drumroll to guess his rank and ability. However, as she dramatically reveals his bare skin, her playful excitement instantly evaporates into pure confusion. Staring at the trembling, battered survivor, she stammers out a shocking truth to her captain. Xian isn't an awakened at all. Giselle ignores Xian's screams of absolute agony over his frozen arm, turning back to her captain to reveal the shocking truth that their prisoner lacks a rank insignia. Face planted in the dirt, our hero listens helplessly as the group bickers over the sheer absurdity of an awakened existing without a mark. The tense moment is shattered when another squad member leans out of their armored transport, screaming at the team to move their asses before the sun goes down. While Xian grips his battered limb, the cheerful girl casually asks her captain what their next move is, pointing out that leaving the boy here is a guaranteed death sentence. The captain falls silent, his hardened gaze dropping as he weighs their limited options. Looking up from the sand, Xian braces himself for whatever fate this imposing leader decides. Making a swift call, the captain orders him tossed into their truck, prompting the blue-haired girl to hoist our boy overhead like a sack of potatoes. Moments later, their heavy military transport tears across the barren wasteland, kicking up massive clouds of dust. Inside the cab, the bespectacled driver is absolutely losing his mind, berating the stoic captain for his reckless solo charges while the sun continues to drop. Meanwhile, bound and tossed among the wooden crates in the back, Bro completely tunes out the screaming match up front, finding the bumpy ride surprisingly cozy. His peaceful moment shifts when a strange sensation catches his eye. A tiny stream of sand swirling unnaturally close to his face. Without him even moving a muscle, the loose grains gather and harden into a sharp, solid spike right beside his head. Sitting up and staring at his bound hands, a quiet realization washes over him. He really has awakened a genuine ability to manipulate the earth. That still leaves one massive question. If he's truly awakened, why couldn't anyone see his rank insignia back there? Squinting closely at his own skin, the answer finally clicks. The faint parallel lines of his mark are perfectly camouflaged, matching the exact color of the desert sand. Mentally reviewing the rules of this world, Xian recalls that an awakened's rank insignia always glows with a specific color based on their affinity. For instance, those blessed with magical abilities project a bright blue aura. Meanwhile, pure physical powerhouses radiate a fierce crimson light. There are always rumors of rare, anomalous affinities breaking the mold, but his situation is entirely unprecedented. A power that bends the very desert to his will is something completely unheard of in modern history. Even though his hidden mark technically registers as a rock-bottom F rank, our hero can feel the boundless, terrifying potential of the earth flowing through his veins. Pure excitement takes over as a wicked grin spreads across his face. But he isn't stupid enough to show his hand just yet. He resolves to lay low and endure the abuse until he fully masters this gift. Once he does, this entire barren world won't just be his playground. It will be his empire. Hours later, the military truck finally arrives at the infamous Mana crystal mine, a bleak industrial fortress carved straight into the jagged wasteland. Stepping out into the harsh sunlight, our boy scans the heavily guarded perimeter, noting that the brutal prison camp actually looks deceptively organized. An aggressive guard barks at him to get moving, threatening to gag him when Xian casually points out that his hands are still bound. As the captive is marched toward the dark entrance of the mine, Yongbum and Giselle watch his departure from a distance. The cheerful girl tries to brush off the boy's survival as pure dumb luck, but her commanding officer isn't buying it. Staring intently at the mine's entrance, the hardened veteran states with absolute certainty that there was nothing accidental about that kid making it out alive. Back when he defeated the giant sandworm, he noticed something strange. The memory of that massive dripping hole blasted through the monster's hide flashes through Jang Yongbum's mind, confirming his darkest suspicions. Snapping back to the present, the veteran watches our hero disappear into the gloomy facility, regretting not asking for a name but absolutely certain their paths will cross again. Stepping past the entrance, our boy finds himself in a completely different world. A sprawling, dimly lit underground settlement teeming with miners and merchants. The massive cavern echoes with the clatter of plates and loud laughter, revealing a fully functioning subterranean society. Our hero casually remarks on the lively atmosphere, earning him a gun to the face from an aggressive guard who barks at him to shut up and wait for the supervisor. But when the hothead actually turns his back to leave, Bro genuinely asks if he's just going to walk away, prompting another furious death threat. Pointing out the obvious security flaw, Zeon asks what happens if he tries something, only for the guard to laugh off the idea that a bound captive could pose any real danger. Muttering under his breath, Zeon decides to take advantage of the freedom to hunt down some food, until something catches his eye. Wandering over to a nearby street stall, he politely gets the attention of an elderly vendor busy grilling up some steaming meat skewers. Suddenly his golden eyes widen as he spots a piece of local decor. Plastered on the wall is a bright propaganda poster, proudly declaring that the miners' grueling labor is what powers the great city of Neo Seoul. Handing over a drink, the old man notices his customer's gaze and sarcastically asks what he thinks of the inspiring motto. Resting his heavily scarred hands on the counter, the vendor cynically remarks that the slogan is laughably true, pointing out that the city runs entirely on the mana crystals they dig up. Confused, Zeon takes a bite of his skewer and asks for clarification, prompting the old man to pose a cryptic question about what else could possibly be fueling the metropolis. The old man stabs a wrinkled finger right at Zeon, making his point impossible to ignore. Leaning in with a manic grin, the vendor spells out the grim reality. Expendable workers like our hero are the true self-replenishing fuel keeping the metropolis alive. Unfazed by the dark revelation, our boy casually chews his food and notes the cook's chatty nature, prompting the elder to grimly joke about outliving the younger generation. A mocking smile crosses the old man's face as he brings up the recent sandworm incident, leaving Zeon genuinely surprised that his subterranean detour is already local gossip. Throwing his head back in laughter, the cook dismisses Bro's chances of survival in this so-called refuge, though the young man quickly clarifies he's only here for the cash. Calling his bluff with a wide grin, the cynical elder gestures over his shoulder, offering to show the newcomer a much harsher truth. He directs attention to a shadowy storage corner, where rows upon rows of identical unmarked cardboard boxes sit collecting dust. Staring at the mundane hoard, Zeon bluntly asks why anyone would collect such garbage, but the vendor's grim expression hints at a much darker origin for the stash. All humor drains from the old man's eyes as he reveals that these boxes are the final remains of past workers, and a preview of what awaits the new arrival. Painting a bleak picture of the past, the elder describes how every fresh arrival desperately clings to the surface, terrified of the lethal mana crystal tunnels below. In this grim visualization, he explains that the doomed laborers will pawn off every last possession, even their own bodies, just to buy another day away from the dark. But the stalling tactics always fail, as the vendor details how their meager funds inevitably slip through their fingers until nothing is left. Once the last gold coin drops, the vendor ruthlessly explains that these broken workers simply surrender to the abyss, convincing themselves it's easier to just let the ravenous mind swallow them whole. The old cook mutters that while great men might leave behind a legacy, the forgotten dregs of this pit only leave behind garbage. Challenging the young man directly, he taunts him about his inevitable demise, causing Zeon to grip his half-eaten skewer tight enough to snap the wood. Tossing the wooden stick onto the counter, Zeon demands the bill, only for the vendor to casually demand a staggering 10 sol. Outrage instantly replaces our boy's bravado as he screams at the cook, demanding to know if the cheap meat is laced with gold to justify such an absurd price. Flashing a wry, defiant grin, Zeon flat out admits his pockets are completely empty. Still ranting about being scammed as a rookie, Zeon remains completely oblivious to the shadowy figures closing in behind him. Gleaming blades and rusted cleavers slide out of the shadows, the metallic scraping signaling a deadly shift in the atmosphere. Glancing over his shoulder with a strained smirk, our hero stubbornly refuses to hand over a single coin. That false confidence shatters the moment he actually registers the wall of armed thugs blocking his only exit. Cold sweat beads on his forehead as the sheer, terrifying reality of his situation finally sets in. Leaning forward with a sinister grin, the elder points out the obvious. Nobody survives running an open stall in this hellhole without some serious muscle backing them up. Plunged into a metaphorical sea of glowing red eyes and readied blades, the young man finds himself completely trapped. Clasping his weathered hands together, the ruthless cook calmly asks his prey how he plans to survive this. Desperation takes over as Zeon slams his fist against the wooden counter, trying to regain control of the spiraling situation. Begging for a compromise, he frantically tries to talk the old man down, insisting there has to be another way to settle this ridiculous debt. With a chillingly generous smile, the vendor offers a sinister alternative, claiming he isn't completely heartless. Everything suddenly makes sense as the elder's gaze drops to the glowing blue monocrystal peeking out of his victim's pocket. Panic spikes through Zeon as he realizes the dangerous whispers about his hidden treasure have already reached the worst possible ears. Dropping his friendly facade, the vendor aggressively demands the stone, promising a hilariously fake fair price. Trying to bluff his way out, our hero stammers about the extreme lengths he went to protect his prize, even as the hulking enforcers step forward. That tough guy act vanishes the second a massive hand clamps over his skull, forcing him to pathetically beg for a line of credit. Unfortunately for him, the apron-wearing brute isn't accepting IOUs, ruthlessly slamming our hero's face straight into the counter with bone-rattling force. Screaming for his boss to let him permanently bury our boy, the blood-soaked goon's murderous rant is violently interrupted by a sickening thud and the sudden, echoing call of a sandblaster. Flesh and bone are instantly decimated as the goon's arm is cleanly severed from his torso, erupting in a horrific fountain of blood right above Bro's head. The sheer brutality of the amputation completely shatters the tension in the room, paralyzing the surrounding chefs and onlookers in wide-eyed horror as one poor soul is left holding the freshly detached limb. Rising to his feet with his arms still extended from the devastating blast, our hero watches coldly as the mutilated thug crashes backward in a fresh spray of crimson. Framed by the falling droplets of gore, this guy's face is completely swallowed by pitch-black shadows, leaving only a pair of glowing yellow eyes that radiate a truly monstrous malice. Shattering that blood-soaked nightmare in an instant, the scene violently snaps back to reality as a massive hand grips our boy's head, with the thug screaming at him to snap out of his daze and pay attention. Demanding to know if he was just dreaming, the confused thug gets nothing but a cold glare and a sharp curse from our hero, who is clearly pissed to be dragged back to this miserable reality. Right back at the vendor's counter, the glowing blue crystal is unceremoniously tossed onto the scarred wood. Snatching up the prize, the elder mocks the sheer desperation it took to keep this magic stone hidden. Tapping the gem with a skeptical eye, the old man begins his ruthless appraisal, clearly unimpressed by its meager size. Slamming his hands onto the scarred wood, Zeon furiously rejects the merchant's lowball offer of a mere 100 sol. The elder simply chuckles at the outburst, cruelly suggesting the boy should have peddled the gem as sandworm dung. Before our hero can argue further, a massive hand violently forces his face down into the counter. Gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles turn white, the young man swallows his pride, knowing this isn't the time to start a bloodbath. Lifting his bruised and bleeding face, Bro forces a chilling smile and demands his payment in full. Mocking his audacity, the old man agrees to the terms but drops a ruthless, thinly veiled threat to aware with pickpockets and robbers. Playing the generous host, the smirking merchant gestures toward a nearby pile of scrap, offering a free bonus for their first transaction. A mountain of discarded junk sits in the corner, holding nothing but broken relics and rusted garbage. Digging through the worthless debris, our boy grumbles about the absolute lack of anything remotely valuable. Watching the kid's stubborn refusal to leave empty-handed, the old man finds himself genuinely amused by the display. Even while trying on ridiculous fake mustaches, Zeon's sheer determination to squeeze every drop of value out of the deal shines through. Suddenly his eyes lock onto a peculiar object buried beneath the trash. Holding up the strange find, he listens as the vendor casually mentions it was abandoned by a passing caravan. Brushing the dust off an ornate hourglass, our guy decides it's the only prize worth taking from the heap. The old man gives Bro a hearty pat on the back, chuckling at his weird taste in useless junk, which earns a totally unbothered yeah in response. Tossing a glance over his shoulder, Zeon casually asks for the old man's name before heading out. Cupping his hands, the vendor cheerfully introduces himself as Klexi. A sly smirk crosses our hero's face as he sarcastically hopes they never cross paths again. Chuckling at the kid's attitude, Klexi leaves the door open for a future reunion as they part ways. Down to the last grains, the mysterious hourglass continues its silent countdown. Peering closely through the curved glass, Bro calculates there are barely 10 minutes left before the sand runs out. Back in the sparse confines of the miners' quarters, Zeon settles onto the floor and begins a rhythmic breathing exercise. Deep inhales and slow exhales help him center his focus, preparing his body for what comes next. Snapping his eyes open, the preparation is complete. Golden light flares in his pupils as our boy channels his energy, commanding the ancient relic to react. But the artifact remains completely lifeless, leaving his glowing reflection staring back in dead silence. Scratching his head in pure frustration, Zeon realizes the trinket has absolutely nothing to do with his recent awakening. Resting his chin on his hand, he tries to make sense of it, absolutely certain he has never laid eyes on the object before today. Yet despite its ordinary appearance, an undeniable instinct tells our guy that this specific item was left behind just for him. Staring into the distorted glass, he wrestles with a bizarre, conflicting sensation. A pull that feels both entirely alien and deeply familiar. Just then, without warning, the door violently flies open as a massive bearded brute storms into the room, screaming for the new arrival. The enraged intruder introduces himself as Park Manhwa, furiously demanding to know why our hero hasn't dragged himself down to the mines yet. Unfazed by the massive fist hurtling toward his face, Zeon calmly corrects the man's insults and points out that nobody actually gave him directions. Mano's brutal strike connects with overwhelming force, launching our boy backward through the air. Trembling with rage, the muscular overseer clenches his fist even tighter, completely unhinged by the kid's defiant attitude. Lunging forward, the brute delivers a crushing downward blow, violently ordering the rookie to keep his mouth shut. A merciless barrage of heavy stomps rains down on the defenseless teen as Manhwa screams about being disrespected by a mere novice. Through the relentless physical and verbal assault, the overseer mocks Bro for being unawakened trash who deserves nothing but pain. Abruptly cutting the beatdown short, the attacker catches his breath and barks a final order for the battered kid to fall in line. Bruised but far from broken, Zeon slowly forces himself back to his feet under the watchful eye of his tormentor. Wiping the blood from his face, a dark determination settles in his glowing eyes as he silently vows that Park Manhwa will be the first person he kills. Sometime later at the Sector 3 mine entrance, the grim reality of this underground industrial prison comes into full view. Marching his new captive over to a bearded worker, the overseer aggressively demands that the rookie be outfitted for the tunnels immediately. As the worker straps a safety vest onto our hero and explains the harsh wage deductions, Zeon completely ignores the threats and simply asks how much he's getting paid. Adjusting his oversized hard hat, Zeon's blunt interruption leaves the veteran miner awkwardly stumbling over his own orientation speech. Out of nowhere, a heavy pickaxe slams directly into the rookie's hard hat, cracking it wide open. Standing over his fallen victim, Park Manhwa screams that the broken gear will come out of his paycheck, while our hero simply mutters that the brute is an absolute idiot. Furious at the disrespect, the muscular overseer barks a new order, demanding the bearded miner take this insolent punk straight to Tunnel 972. Hesitation flickers across the veteran worker's face, but another explosive threat from the boss forces him to grab the kid's shoulder and comply. Refusing to let the unhinged overseer have the last word, this guy cheerfully yells a mocking "screw you" over his shoulder, completely unfazed by Mano's explosive threats about magic stones and bloody murder. Stepping onto a high walkway overlooking the massive cavern, the guide quietly explains that they caught the overseer on a terrible day after a massive gambling loss. Riding the rusted elevator cage down into the abyss, our boy questions the underground economy, learning that this place runs on every vice imaginable. A cynical smirk crosses the teen's face as he notes how profitable those vices must be with fools like Manhwa around, earning a surprised chuckle from his escort. Flexing his hand, a new recruit dramatically complains about his delicate skin bruising easily, prompting a strangely grim response from the older man. Staring into the shadows as the lift finally clanks to a halt, the veteran softly reveals that absolutely no one ever gets injured in this specific shaft. Thick smoke pours from the entrance of shaft 972, painting a deeply unsettling picture of the task ahead. Walking out onto the rocky floor, Bro assumes it's just a quick gathering job, only to be bluntly told that he isn't going to return. As the heavy metal gate slides shut, the guide confesses that over a dozen workers have vanished into this exact cavern without a single trace. Rising back toward the surface, the older miner peers down at the stranded kid, offering a heavy apology mixed with genuine gratitude. Guilt washes over the man's weathered face, deeply thankful that this fearless newcomer is taking the doomed shift so no one else has to. Left completely alone in the pitch-black tunnel, Zeon screams up at the ascending elevator, the horrifying realization finally hitting him that every single missing worker died down here. Staring up at the retreating metal cage, our hero can hardly process the fact that he's actually been abandoned in this death trap. The shock quickly morphs into explosive rage, and he violently swings his pickaxe, cursing the overseer for throwing his life away over a petty bad mood. But his furious outburst is cut embarrassingly short when the heavy tool slips right out of his grip. Panic instantly replaces his anger as he desperately reaches out, watching his only weapon bounce away into the suffocating darkness. Now completely defenseless, the teen finally takes a good look around the massive, mist-filled cavern, trying to make sense of his bizarre surroundings. It doesn't take long for him to recognize that the thick fog isn't natural. It's pure, highly concentrated mana, something the ordinary miners wouldn't have even been able to sense. Covering his face as the pressure intensifies, Bro realizes that any normal human would have already suffered a fatal mana overload, leaving him to wonder what monstrous source is producing all this energy. Suddenly, something in the hazy distance catches his eye, snapping him out of his deep thoughts. Lying abandoned on the rocky floor is his missing pickaxe, bringing a brief wave of relief to the stranded kid. Stepping up to his recovered gear, he tries to stay optimistic, brushing off the fact that the handle is completely snapped in half. His brief moment of comfort vanishes in a split second when the ground beneath his boots completely gives way, plunging him backward into a swirling vortex of red mist. Pure terror widens his eyes as gravity violently yanks him into the abyss. Tumbling headfirst into the void, our boy screams out in horror, suddenly realizing that this isn't just a sinkhole. It's an active portal. With a final echoing thud, his dislodged hard hat plummets past the broken tool, leaving the silent cavern completely empty once again. Plunging deeper into the abyss, the only light left fades as he is swallowed by the dark. The terrifying descent forces his life to flash before his eyes, dragging him back to a miserable childhood where adults whispered about the abandoned orphan freezing in the rain. Memories of brutal beatdowns flood his mind, recalling the desperate days when he was stomped into the dirt just for stealing a scrap of meat to survive. Running for his life became second nature, constantly fleeing from furious thugs while secretly wishing for a future that wasn't just about basic survival. Then comes the darkest memory of all. Standing paralyzed over a lifeless body in a grim alleyway, hunted by ruthless enemies promising to end his pathetic existence. Tumbling endlessly through the crackling void, those haunting voices echo in his ears, reminding him of a time when every waking moment was spent dodging death. Reaching out into the empty darkness, our hero realizes that beneath all the trauma and running, all he ever truly wanted was a quiet, ordinary life. Jolted out of the tragic visions by a harsh impact, he finally hits solid ground, lying unconscious on a smoking rocky surface. Groaning in pain, Xian slowly pushes himself up, immediately noticing the suffocating, unnatural heat baking his skin. His fingers brush against the scorched earth, leaving dark streaks as he realizes the entire floor is coated in a thick layer of sizzling ash. Sweat pours down his face while a low rumble vibrates through his boots, sending a fresh wave of panic straight to his core. Connecting the dots, Bro stares upward in absolute horror as the grim reality sets in. That swirling sinkhole wasn't just a cave-in, it was a gateway. A massive fiery landscape stretches out before him, confirming his absolute worst nightmare. He has been dropped straight into an active high-level dungeon. Before he can even process the sheer scale of the volcanic wasteland, a sudden geyser of scorching steam erupts right next to him. Scooping up a smoking chunk of rubble from the cracked earth, our boy instantly realizes his mistake as the superheated stone sears his bare palm with a nasty hiss. Yanking his hand back with a sharp curse, Xian drops the scorching stone as the blistering heat finally registers. Blowing desperately on his seared fingertips, our hero faces the grim truth. This isn't a nightmare, but a lethal zone that even the elite forces of Neo's soul would dread entering. The dark soot coating his skin tells a terrifying story. If he breathes in this superheated volcanic ash for much longer, his lungs will literally cook from the inside out. Wasting no time, Bro rips a thick strip of fabric straight from his own clothes. Securing the makeshift mask over his face, he quickly calculates his odds, reasoning that every deadly labyrinth has to have an exit hidden somewhere. His eyes lock onto the tallest, most menacing volcanic peak in the distance, instantly marking it as his only ticket out of this fiery hellscape. With the suffocating atmosphere already acting as a ticking clock, our boy knows he has to move right now before the local monsters catch his scent. Kicking off the scorched earth, Xian launches into a full sprint, determined to carve the most direct path straight to that mountain. Vaulting over a bubbling pool of molten rock, he hypes himself up, refusing to let this inferno break his legendary stubbornness. Hitting the jagged ground on the other side, a brief wave of relief washes over him after sticking the dangerous landing, but the fragile crust beneath his boots suddenly shatters, instantly turning his moment of triumph into a lethal trap. Flailing wildly in the air, our hero screams out in pure panic as gravity drags him down. Plunging backward toward the glowing magma, it looks like his grand escape is about to end in a fiery grave. Miraculously catching a jagged ledge at the very last second, Bro hauls his trembling body upward while loudly declaring that he isn't terrified in the slightest. Collapsing face first onto the solid rock, Xian just lies there gasping for air, completely drained but incredibly lucky to still be breathing. His fingers dig into the stone as pure fury takes over. Tipping his head back, Xian screams a blood-curdling vow of revenge against Park Manhwa, promising the traitor is a dead man walking. But the scorching air forces him to choke back his wrath, realizing that losing his temper is only going to boil him alive faster. Forcing his breathing to steady, our hero makes a silent promise to claw his way out of this hellhole no matter the cost. Staring down the treacherous path ahead, he calculates the exact number of leaps required to cross the molten expanse. 4 perfectly executed jumps are all that stand between our boy and the end of this fiery gauntlet. Locking his mask into place, this guy crushes any lingering doubt, commanding his own body to stop thinking and just move. There is absolutely no way his story ends as ash in some forgotten underground labyrinth. Pushing off the crumbling rock, Xian launches himself over the boiling magma with everything he has left. Out of nowhere, a colossal beast made of molten rock erupts from the depths, its massive jaws opening directly in his flight path. The creature's teeth slam shut with a deafening crunch, swallowing our boy whole before he even registers the ambush. Plunging back into the fiery depths, the titan leaves behind nothing but a massive splash of liquid fire. Deep beneath the surface, the rocky leviathan sinks into the glowing orange abyss. The giant monster continues to move forward, unaware of his surrounding. But just then, his eyes catches something above the hanging cliff. Xian has actually survived. He managed to reach the other side and holds on with his power for his dear life. Gripping his vest, our hero connects the dots. His newfound ability to manipulate that very ash is the only reason he isn't a pile of cinders right now. But the relief is short-lived as his hands give out, sending him crashing onto the scorching rocky floor right next to the monster. Staring up at the cavernous ceiling, Bro realizes this dungeon's brutal environment is far deadlier than the actual monsters roaming it. Every breath fries his lungs, and his vision starts to blur as the suffocating heat threatens to drag him into unconsciousness. Lying face down in the dirt, he genuinely starts to wonder if this is where his journey ends. But just when it seems over, our hero's fingers dig violently into the scorching earth, crushing the dirt into a tight fist as pure defiance overrides the pain. Trembling with effort, Xion pushes himself off the ground, refusing to accept such an unfair death when he hasn't even lived long enough to get a girlfriend. A heavy boot slams into the ash-covered floor, anchoring him back into the fight. With his eyes glowing fiercely, our boy summons a swirling vortex of dark ash, loudly declaring that the Grim Reaper will have to settle for a crocodile skin bag today. Above him, the colossal magma beast lets out an earth-shattering roar, ready to crush its stubborn prey once and for all. Meeting the monster's fury head-on, our hero unleashes a desperate battle cry of his own. Suddenly, a mysterious voice echoes through the cavern, praising his unique skills and making him freeze mid-attack in sheer confusion. Eyes wide with shock, Bro realizes this isn't the Grim Reaper talking to him. Someone else is actually down here. Plunging from the sky like a meteor, a white-haired swordsman drops directly toward the giant rock monster, completely changing the stakes of this battle. Looking up, Xion instantly locks eyes with the grinning face of the eccentric old man. Plunging at terminal velocity, the white-haired swordsman doesn't look terrified. He looks absolutely thrilled. Mid-air, a calloused hand tightens its grip around the hilt of a massive blade. With terrifying momentum, the mysterious fighter swings his weapon straight down toward the cavern floor. Realizing he's right in the blast zone, our hero throws his arms up and braces for the inevitable impact. A blinding pillar of white energy detonates upon contact, instantly vaporizing the terrain and launching the boy backward. The sheer force of the strike tears the dungeon apart, sending massive chunks of rock hurtling through the air. Shockwaves continue to rip through the cavern, turning the battlefield into a chaotic storm of dust and destruction. Caught completely helpless in the hurricane of debris, Bro screams as he's tossed around like a ragdoll. Pinned to the dirt, Xion clutches his head in agony, his eardrums completely blown out as he tries to process what kind of monster that Grandpa actually is. Panic suddenly overrides his confusion. If the shockwave was that devastating, what happened to the giant magma beast? He peers over the shattered ledge, and the sight below leaves him speechless. The colossal creature lies completely defeated at the swordsman's feet. His hand shakes uncontrollably against the stone as he realizes this isn't just some high-ranking awakened. This is a realm of strength that defies all logic. Bathed in the glow of falling embers, the veteran warrior radiates an aura of absolute, untouchable supremacy. Stepping forward through the blazing inferno, the white-haired powerhouse makes his next move. The heavy boot of the white-haired veteran slams into the cracked earth, demanding to know what he's looking at. Staring up through the swirling dust, our hero freezes as the imposing figure clarifies. He wants to know the kid's name. A chilling, predatory smile creeps across the old man's face as he gives a strict 3-second ultimatum. 3, the swordsman counts down, his massive, ornate blade looming ominously on his back. 2, he continues, the tension in the air thickening with every passing millisecond. Reflected in Xion's wide, terrified eye, the countdown hits 1. Towering over the trembling boy with eyes glowing a sinister red, the monstrous warrior declares that time has officially run out. A wicked smirk stretches across the veteran's face as he slowly unsheathes a colossal blade, taunting his prey's absolute silence. His expression shifting to pure killing intent, he utters a single terrifying word: die. Desperate to survive, our boy throws his hands up and screams for his life, which finally convinces the swordsman he isn't dealing with a mute. Panting heavily, Bro shouts out his name at the top of his lungs, hoping it's enough to stop the blade. Without missing a beat, the old man mocks the name Xion as stupid, leaving our hero internally fuming over the sheer audacity of this grandpa. Before this guy can even voice his complaints, the old man suddenly unleashes another devastating strike right next to Xion. Clutching his ringing ears in agony, Xion watches as the veteran stands unfazed in the chaos, calmly stating his name, Diaden. Completely baffled by the madness, Xion demands to know what on earth Diaden thinks he's doing. Still reeling from the chaos, he snaps at the overpowered stranger for constantly insulting and threatening him. Our hero tries to play nice, thanking the old man for the rescue while asking what he did to deserve the hostility, only to get instantly shut down with another insult. Tuning out our boy's complaints entirely, Diaden crouches beside the glowing red rift and casually points out that Xion just walked straight into a snare. The veteran breaks down the dungeon's mechanics, revealing that when a labyrinth becomes oversaturated with mana, it violently expels the excess energy by tearing open a new entrance. As dark snake-like tendrils of energy wrap around his memory of the event, Bro learns that this specific rift acts as a snare designed to drag living prey straight into the abyss. A sudden memory hits Xion like a truck. The grinning face of Park Manhwa flashes in his mind as he finally realizes that bastard intentionally set him up to die. Snapping back to the present, our boy furiously demands the veteran stop calling him an idiot, completely missing the gravity of his situation. With a heavy sigh, Diaden reaches out and squishes Xion's cheeks together, ordering the boy to focus his mana into his eyes so he can see the truth for himself. Golden energy flares to life within the boy's pupil as he struggles to comply, while the old warrior barks at him to push the purity of his power even higher. Guided by the veteran's strict instructions, our hero shifts his perception, learning to look past the physical world and truly feel the ambient energy around him. In an instant, the barren reflection in his eye twists into something entirely different. A horrifying, fleshy monstrosity lurking right in front of them. Gripping the terrified boy's head to keep him from looking away, Dronzer calmly notes that his impromptu student has finally opened his eyes to the real danger. Looming over them is a colossal skeletal beast radiating a fiery aura, a stealth predator that devours oblivious prey before they even know they are being hunted. Cold sweat breaks out across Zeon's skin as he realizes this massive nightmare was standing right on top of him, completely undetected by his basic senses. Realizing he owes his life to this grumpy grandpa, Zeon watches in absolute awe as Dronzer unleashes a towering vertical beam of light that cleaves the earth and the monster in half. Staring ahead, Zeon finally processes the sheer magnitude of what just happened, realizing this grumpy veteran has now pulled him from the jaws of death twice. A profound sense of awe washes over our boy as he gazes at the old warrior, completely baffled by the unfathomable depths of the man's power. Unable to hold back his burning curiosity, the kid demands to know the true identity of his savior, only to get immediately chewed out by the annoyed swordsman for forgetting his name. Frustration boils over as our hero clarifies he means the absurd level of strength on display, desperately pleading to understand what kind of hellish landscape they've been dragged into. Looking out over the desolate wasteland, Dronzer casually reveals that they are deep inside a dungeon. And more importantly, he considers this nightmare zone his personal hunting territory. Flashing a wild, intense grin over his shoulder, the veteran challenges his impromptu student to use his newly awakened vision to uncover the truth. Gripping the intricate hilt of his sword, the veteran barks out a single ominous command, "Crayon," and instantly triggers a catastrophic chain reaction. Just then, the ground violently ruptures as a colossal spike-covered monolith erupts from the earth, radiating a terrifying fiery energy that engulfs the battlefield. Caught completely off guard by the deafening shockwave, Bro clamps his hands over his ears, his face twisting in pure agony from the overwhelming pressure. Peering upward through the chaos, his confusion rapidly morphs into sheer terror as he tries to comprehend the veteran's insane strategy. High above, the sky suddenly ignites as a massive swarm of blazing monstrous birds descends, leaving the kid screaming in absolute horror. Surrounded by a deadly rain of fiery embers, Zeon freezes as Dronzer's booming voice cuts through the roaring flames. Tightening his hold on his greatsword, the ruthless mentor barks out his final lesson for the day, ordering the boy to fight for his own life if he wants to prove his worth. Cursing the crazy old man under his breath, our guy desperately throws himself backward to dodge a massive red-eyed avian predator diving straight for his throat. Gritting his teeth against the blistering heat, Zeon realizes he's in serious trouble as the blazing flock swarms him with terrifying, inescapable speed. Barely keeping his head attached to his shoulders, Zeon ducks under a blinding streak of light that tears through the air. Dancing backward, his boots scrape the scorched earth as another lethal strike grazes his legs. Panting heavily, our hero curses the slippery monsters, realizing he can't outrun their blinding speed. And worse, they are deliberately targeting his left side. Clicking his tongue in annoyance, he raises his arm and the volcanic ash started to wrap around to brace for the next wave. High above, the demonic avian predators fold their wings and plummet straight toward him like living missiles. The impact is devastating, slamming into Bro's chest and sending him skidding violently across the battlefield. Shielding his battered face, he desperately admits that his normal vision is completely useless against this kind of velocity. Panic sets in as the grim reality washes over him. If he doesn't figure out a counterattack right now, he is going to die on this dirt. Glancing over at the veteran warrior, Zeon refuses to go out like a pathetic weakling after already being saved twice. Suddenly, a booming voice shatters his internal spiral, demanding to know why he isn't responding. Dronzer scoffs at the kid's silence, completely unaware that the earlier shockwave has left our boy's eardrums ringing so hard he can barely hear a word. Staring down at the blood-soaked ground, he forces his mind to work, desperately searching for a method to track an invisible enemy. A relentless swarm of fiery black birds dive-bombs our hero, forcing him into a frantic scramble for survival and to thinking about what he can do. Crossing his lacerated arms to absorb the brutal impacts, Zeon remembers the insult from Old Man a while ago, but he also remembers the instructions. Shutting his eyes against the pain, Zeon follows the strict command to channel pure concentrated mana directly into his vision. A brilliant golden light erupts from Zeon's eye, as he finally grasps the veteran's command to perceive the world entirely through mana. Tearing through the sky, a blazing black avian locks onto its target and initiates a lethal high-speed dive. At the last possible second, our hero slips past the explosive impact and forms a ash barrier. Surrounded by the scorching inferno, Bro keeps his glowing gaze locked forward, tuning out the heat to sense the raw magical signatures around him. The battlefield shifts into an abstract web of glowing red energy lines, mapping out the perfect trajectory for a close-range counter. Trusting this new sight, Zeon steps into the strike zone and shatters the incoming beast with a flawless punch, completely baffled that the crazy advice actually worked. As the fiery aura dissipates around his fist, Zeon realizes the old warrior had calculated this exact sequence of events from the very beginning. But the awe is cut short when a colossal magma-infused crocodile erupts from the earth behind him, prompting Diadon to launch himself directly at the towering threat. Roaring with maniacal laughter, the veteran unleashes a blinding wave of light from his blade, absolutely thrilled to finally face a real challenge. With a single devastating motion, the sheer force of the slash cleaves straight through the monstrous reptile and carves a massive trench into the terrain. Consumed by the adrenaline rush, the old man flashes a deranged grin, his eyes glowing as he demands even more carnage. Without missing a beat, he hurls himself back into the fray, daring the towering behemoth to push him to his absolute limits. One final, earth-shattering swing connects, obliterating the creature's rocky exterior and reducing the giant threat to flying debris. Surveying the crumbling remains, the bloodthirsty mentor sighs in pure disappointment at how quickly the monster folded. Lowering his weapon, Diadon glares down with terrifying intensity, proving exactly why he exists on a completely different level. Standing amidst the ruined landscape, the old veteran throws his head back and loudly complains that the dungeon's pathetic inhabitants barely served as a warm-up. Covered in scratches and blood, our boy can only stare up in pure disbelief, actually finding himself pitying the slaughtered beasts. Taking in the sheer scale of the massacre scattered across the scorched earth, Zeon is left completely speechless by the veteran's monstrous strength. A fragile smile finally breaks across his bruised face, desperately hoping that the worst of the danger has finally passed. But that brief moment of peace shatters instantly when a deep rumble shakes the ground, wiping the relief right off our hero's face. Without warning, a massive eruption of fire and jagged debris violently tears through the battlefield. The sheer concussive force of the blast sends the young hunter flying backward, his teeth gritted against the agonizing impact. Hitting the dirt hard, Bro struggles onto his hands and knees, violently hacking up dust as he tries to catch his breath. Looking up through the haze, he finds Diadon standing completely unfazed, calmly explaining that the shockwave was merely the dungeon boss announcing its presence. As colossal, scale-covered claws step out from the fiery wreckage, the mentor makes it clear that every dungeon harbors a core entity like this one. A towering, shadowy behemoth unfurls its wings in a storm of blue flames, and the old man proudly declares that this exact creature is his true target. Paralyzed by the overwhelming pressure radiating from the beast, Zeon stares up in absolute terror at the nightmare looming over them. In stark contrast, a wicked, menacing grin stretches across Diadon's face, his blood pumping at the prospect of a genuine fight. The monstrous crimson drake fully hauls itself out of the molten chasm, casting a massive shadow over the two humans below. Still reeling from the reveal, Zeon questions if they are facing a true dragon, but the veteran casually crosses his arms and clarifies it's merely a B-rank drake, though still a formidable threat. Staring at the blinding light erupting from the ground, Zeon finally pieces together exactly what a B-rank classification actually means. Projecting a massive aura, the beast unleashes a terrifying pressure that our boy instantly recognizes as a high-tier monster's field. Amused that our hero even knows what a field is, the veteran plants a heavy hand on his head, while Zeon drops some crucial lore. Any beast B rank or higher actually develops unique human-like traits. With the colossal drake charging up a sinister blue energy right in front of them, the crash course continues. These monsters are classed exactly like awakened humans, meaning a red aura signifies a pure close-quarters brawler. As a massive block of solid ice suddenly materializes over the scorching terrain, the horrifying reality of a blue field clicks into place. In a terrifying display of power, the behemoth unleashes a catastrophic torrent of freezing energy right over their heads, instantly transforming the fiery chasm into a towering glacier. Clutching his head in absolute panic, our hero screams out in terror at the sheer, overpowered absurdity of a magic-wielding dragon. But Diadon doesn't even flinch. He launches himself straight into the sky, swinging a colossal red energy blade right at the beast's throat. Jaw practically hitting the floor, Bro watches a mountain-sized chunk of ice get cleanly severed in half by the old man's strike. A cold sweat breaks out across the young hunter's face as he realizes every single survival tactic he ever learned is completely useless here. Watching the drake charge a devastating blast point blank, Zeon admits that his entire worldview means nothing compared to the monstrous power of his mentor. Crashing down like a meteor, the veteran delivers an earth-shattering slash right between the dragon's glowing eyes. Refusing to go down easily, the colossal predator retaliates, swiping a massive magic-infused claw straight at the airborne swordsman. Meeting the brutal counterattack head-on, the old man swings his blade with enough force to completely deflect the towering appendage. Eyes glowing with a terrifying crimson light, Diadon lets out a battle cry and lunges right back into the fray, completely addicted to the thrill of the hunt. Gathering a terrifying amount of mana, the colossal beast charges a glowing blue sphere of destruction right in the veteran's face. Instead of backing down, Diadon flashes a manic razor-toothed grin. He's absolutely loving this. Surging forward, the old swordsman leaps directly into the beast's jaws, detonating a blinding burst of white energy before the blast can fire. Cackling like an absolute madman, the bloodthirsty hunter mocks the towering drake, asking if that little love tap stung. Tightening his iron grip on the colossal hilt, he promises to personally cure the monster of its misery. With a devastating swing, a maelstrom of red and black aura completely engulfs the predator, as the veteran declares today its official memorial. Down on the ground, our boy is having a complete meltdown, screaming through tears that he's the one about to end up in a coffin. Sprinting for his life, Zeon begs the two apocalyptic titans to just sit down and talk things out like civilized beings. But diplomacy is instantly off the table as a monstrous shockwave erupts from their clash, violently launching this guy backward like a helpless ragdoll. To protect himself, Zeon creates a wall from the volcanic ash, taking the impact head-on. Digging his boots desperately into the cracked earth, he realizes that just standing near this fight is enough to tear a normal person apart. Gritting his teeth against the flying shrapnel, our hero cowers behind a wall, praying he survives the collateral damage. Completely oblivious to his student's suffering, Diadon is having the time of his life, his red eyes glowing with pure unadulterated joy. Riding atop the rearing behemoth like it's a mechanical bull, the manic swordsman asks if this feels like an amusement park ride for the newly named Crimson Drake. A split second later, a monstrous eruption of fire and shattered earth obliterates the terrain, carving out a massive blazing crater with Diadon standing dead center. Back on the crumbling surface, Zeon finds himself completely trapped, surrounded by a deadly force of impact. Panic washes over him as he stares down the lethal hazards, realizing there's nowhere left to run. Cursing his absolute helplessness, our boy grits his teeth, desperately trying to find a way out of this nightmare. Before he can make a move, the force of impact throws Zeon, plunging him backward into a dark crater. Tumbling uncontrollably down the jagged, steep incline, he frantically covers his head to survive the brutal fall. Gravity shows no mercy, pulling him midair directly toward a massive jagged stalagmite waiting to impale him. A sickening tear of flesh cuts through the air as a violent spray of dark blood splatters across our boy's face, the sudden, agonizing trauma hitting him all at once. His vision blurs for a split second before his eyes snap wide open in absolute, unadulterated shock. While he plummets toward a fiery abyss below, a catastrophic clash of titans rages on in the sky above. Laughing off the danger, Diadon flashes a manic grin, screaming at the Crimson Drake to show him some real power. Casually standing atop the beast's skull, the veteran forces its snout into the dirt, mocking the dungeon boss for bowing so easily. Pushed to its absolute limit, the furious predator opens its massive jaws, charging a crackling orb of blinding white energy. Instead of dodging, the old master just smirks, openly praising the monster for finally acting like a proper threat. With a deafening roar, the colossal dragon unleashes a concentrated, devastating beam of pure destruction. The sheer force of the blast triggers a monumental explosion, completely engulfing the battlefield in a blinding flash of white. As the blinding light fades, the colossal beast exhales a thick plume of smoke, convinced its devastating attack wiped out the threat. But a chilling voice echoes from the sky above, shattering the monster's short-lived victory. Tearing through the clouds, a gargantuan translucent blade wrapped in crimson lightning plummets straight into the creature. Caught completely off guard, the massive predator can only widen its jaws in sheer, unadulterated panic. Diadon stands triumphantly atop the beast's snout, driving his ornate greatsword deep into its flesh, while casually mentioning his year-long hunt across the desert. Gripping the hilt with absolute authority, the veteran reveals his true, terrifying motive: harvesting the monster's heart to forge his ultimate weapon. His left eye flares with a sinister crimson glow as he delivers a cold, merciless death sentence. The intricately carved blade sinks even deeper, erupting with a blinding surge of lethal energy. Pinned to the shattered earth, the once mighty dungeon boss is completely overwhelmed by a swirling vortex of blue and red power. Drinking in the creature's life force, the weapon begins to pulse with an intense, violent aura. Every ancient rune carved into the steel ignites, radiating a blinding mixture of pure white and crimson light. Stepping away from the carcass, the veteran glances over his shoulder as the newly empowered blade hovers obediently behind him. Shards of mystical energy orbit the fully awakened weapon, signaling that the brutal forging process is finally complete. Wrapping his weathered hands around the hilt, the old master admires his prize with deep, undeniable satisfaction. A wicked, toothy grin stretches across his face as he praises the blade by name, reveling in the monstrous power he just unlocked. From the edge of the shattered battlefield, the veteran's moment of glory is abruptly cut short when a snarky voice calls out, mocking him for talking to a sword. Peeking over a rocky ledge, our battered hero admits the old man is insanely strong for taking down the Drake, while the master just chuckles, genuinely surprised the kid is still breathing. Resting his chin on his bruised arms, the boy sighs, confessing that he barely made it out of that chaos alive. Back when Zeon is about to get boiled into the molten lava, a sharp sting grazes his cheek and sheer panic instantly washes over his face. Clutching his head in terror, he realizes he's dropped right into another deadly trap. But at the death door, our boy was not ready to give up. Just then he activate his ability. Suddenly he form a solid rock step from the volcanic ash. Somehow he hits the dirt in one piece, gasping for air and praising his own ridiculous survival skills. Looking back at the grinning master, our boy realizes that dodging all those insane shockwaves actually leveled up his reflexes. A fact the old man smugly acknowledges. Without warning, the veteran hoists him up by the collar, bluntly announcing that with the boss dead, the entire dungeon is about to cave in. Dangling in the air, the kid shoots him a confused glare, wondering why he's suddenly being manhandled. Instead of answering, the white-haired powerhouse just lets out a booming maniacal laugh. With a cheerful farewell, he violently hurls our hero straight toward a swirling pitch-black escape portal. Sailing through the void, the boy screams absolute murder, cursing the crazy old man as he vanishes into the abyss. Just as quickly as he disappeared, the portal violently ejects our wide-eyed boy under a bright cloudy sky, sending him plummeting backward toward a sprawling expanse of sand. He tumbles head over heels through the dirt, ending up with a massive mouthful of grit. Hacking up sand, the kid demands to know where they are, but the veteran calmly steps out behind him, explaining that the collapsing dungeon simply spat them out here. Annoyed, our hero asks why they couldn't just use the front door, earning a deadpan insult from the old man. The master doesn't sugarcoat it. He bluntly states that he needs the boy's sand-manipulating powers, but right now he's nothing but dead weight. Gesturing toward the horizon, the white-haired powerhouse offers an easy out: head straight to Neo Soul and return to a normal life. Alternatively, he flashes a mocking smirk and suggests the kid tag along to become a slightly stronger idiot. Bro sits in the dirt completely bewildered, stammering out a question about how long this supposed training trip will take. Staring off into the distance, the veteran admits he has no idea. It could be months, years, or even decades before the journey ends. That terrifying timeline leaves the young man completely stunned as the pressure suddenly ramps up. Turning around, the old man presents the ultimate gamble: a safe, boring existence, or a path with a 99% mortality rate. Their eyes lock in a tense standoff, and the master demands a final answer right this second. Kneeling in the dirt, Xian lets out a manic grin as the sheer absurdity of the offer finally sinks in. Pointing a trembling finger at the veteran, our boy demands to know if the master has completely lost his mind. He lays out the ridiculous terms: abandoning a safe bed and shade just to march into a scorching wasteland alongside a madman. Unfazed by the outburst, Diiden stares right back and coldly confirms those are the exact conditions. Turning his head to spit in the sand, the young man acts like he's completely done with this conversation. But instead of walking away, Xian plants his feet behind the swordsman and firmly declares he's coming along. His reasoning is simple. He's got a massive grudge to settle, and right now he's far too weak to claim his revenge. Flashing a dangerously unhinged smile, our hero makes it clear that his list of targets includes the old man himself. Standing before the towering warrior, Xian admits that Diiden possesses an overwhelming power unlike anything he's ever witnessed. The veteran bursts into hearty laughter, mocking the kid's bold words and asking if he's just certain he's going to die. Clenching his fist as sand swirls around him, our boy vows that surviving this journey will make him the strongest person alive. A wicked grin stretches across the master's face as he promises that this arrogant confidence will eventually turn into bitter regret. Without another word, Diiden marches off into the dunes, barking at his new idiot disciple to hurry up, while Xian immediately complains about the insult. Harsh reality quickly sets in as a blinding, oppressive sun beats down through the golden clouds. Barely surviving the grueling pace, a completely drained Xian screams at the old man, desperately begging for a break. Exhausted beyond belief, he struggles to keep up with the veteran's relentless pace. But Diiden doesn't even break his stride, leaving the kid to suffer in the dust. Frustration finally boils over, and our boy screams at the veteran, demanding to know why he's acting like a moody teenager with these silent treatments. The heat is absolutely suffocating, with temperatures easily pushing 50 degrees. Every step feels like sinking into quicksand, and the exhausted teen knows that dehydration or heatstroke is practically guaranteed at this rate. Stopping in his tracks, Diiden finally speaks up, bluntly calling his new disciple a complete fool who can't even tap into a fraction of his own strength. Highlighting the glaring irony, the master points out that our hero has the power to manipulate sand, yet he's pathetically struggling to walk across a desert. Clutching his head, Bro fires back defensively, reminding the old man that he literally just awakened his abilities days ago. Diiden shoots him a cold, unforgiving glare, completely unfazed by the excuse. Desperate to justify his weakness, the rookie insists that he's nothing more than a lowly F rank, nowhere near the master's level. That strikes a nerve, and the swordsman violently yanks Xian by the collar, roaring that a person's rank means absolutely nothing. Getting right in his face, the veteran challenges the ridiculous notion that anyone is just born as an S-rank powerhouse. With furious intensity, the master demands to know if his student is just going to give up on life, reminding him that simply being an awakened makes him incredibly blessed compared to normal people. Processing the harsh truth, our hero falls silent, forced to reconsider everything he thought he knew about his own potential. Poking a finger hard into Xian's chest, Diiden orders him to stop whining and start using his brain, because having intact limbs is useless if he remains an idiot. Diiden's tone shifts, reminding Xian that this sand manipulation is his unique power. The veteran lays down the law, explaining that true growth only comes when our boy figures out how to wield his abilities on his own. Before Zeon can even process the advice, the old man suddenly grabs him by the collar. Diaden barks that if his student can't figure it out right now, he might as well prepare to die. Forced into a corner, the rookie takes a hesitant step onto the shifting dunes. In an instant, the loose grains respond to his will, swirling around him in a controlled vortex. Analyzing his newfound control, our hero notes that his range is limited to a 5-meter radius. Not great, but workable. His main problem is the terrain itself, as sinking into the deep dunes drains his stamina far too quickly. A light bulb goes off in his head, and he focuses his energy to compress the loose grains into a solid surface beneath his boots. Thrilled by his own genius, the teen practically skips across the desert, finally enjoying a comfortable stroll. But the victory is short-lived, as he quickly realizes this method is burning through his mana reserves way too fast. Refusing to give up, Bro shifts tactics, channeling his energy directly into his legs to make trudging through the wasteland easier. Standing quietly, the swordsman listens as his disciple endlessly mutters to himself, tweaking his technique through pure trial and error. Even when the kid comically faceplants into the dirt, Diaden can't help but respect his relentless persistence. Evaluating Zeon's progress, Diaden silently concludes that while the boy's official badge might say F rank, his actual mana control easily puts him in the E or D tier. Finally nailing the technique, Zeon stands firm on the shifting dunes, his boots glowing with concentrated mana as he shouts in pure triumph. Sprinting over to his master, the rookie eagerly explains how he localized his energy just to the soles of his boots to make traversing the wasteland a total breeze. Letting the success go straight to his head, our boy sticks his tongue out and starts relentlessly taunting the veteran swordsman about his lack of sand walking skills. That cockiness earns him an immediate skull-rattling punch right to the top of his dome. Standing over the flattened teen, Diaden sighs in absolute annoyance, scolding him for wasting precious stamina on stupid jokes when survival is on the line. But when the kid doesn't twitch, the old man's irritation quickly shifts to sheer panic as he realizes he might have actually knocked his new disciple out cold. Groaning in pain, our hero slowly blinks his eyes open, his brain completely scrambled as he tries to remember what just happened. Sitting nearby and casually chewing on some jerky, the master immediately goes back to complaining about how much time this little nap just cost them. Still nursing a massive headache, Zeon grumbles about his battered, bruised body just as a piece of dried meat gets tossed right at his face. Staring at the tough ration in the dirt, the exhausted teen realizes this is the closest thing to a break he's going to get. Diaden orders him to eat up and listen closely, his tone shifting into something far more serious as he prepares to share a piece of his own past. The veteran explains that in his younger days, being weak wasn't an automatic death sentence, and protecting those who couldn't fight was actually considered a badge of honor. Gnawing on the tough meat, Zeon listens quietly as the old swordsman admits he still can't accept the ruthless, survival of the fittest reality that has now become the norm. Looking down at his battered student, Diaden delivers a harsh ultimatum: stay on the ground if he's ready to die, or get back on his feet and fight to live. Swallowing his pride along with the dry rations, Zeon reluctantly forces himself upright, knowing full well the brutal training is far from over. Zeon squints into the distance, trying to process the sheer scale of the man sitting beside him. Sitting out in the desolate wasteland, our hero realizes just how many centuries of memories and battles this ancient swordsman must have piled up. But all that profound respect vanishes the second Bro notices the old man is just soaking his tough jerky in spit, instead of actually chewing it. Realizing it's actually a genius way to conserve moisture in a bone-dry desert, our boy begrudgingly copies the gross technique, annoyed he wasn't tipped off sooner. A quiet realization hits him. Diaden isn't going to hand him survival on a silver platter, he's forcing him to learn the hard way. The only problem is that this underground miner has literally no idea how to survive in such a harsh environment. Under the vast starry expanse of the D-sky, Zeon's desperate plea for seconds is instantly shut down by a ruthless rejection. Suddenly, a massive sneeze rips through him as the brutal reality of the environment sets in. Wrapping his arms around himself, our guy curses his own memory for forgetting just how freezing these barren wastelands get after dark. Exhaustion weighs heavy on him, mostly because he spent the entire night wide awake listening to this absolute lunatic having a full-blown conversation with his giant sword. Parched beyond belief, Zeon's complaints die in his throat when he spots the master casually wringing fresh water out of a twisted rag straight into his mouth. Pure frustration boils over as our hero glares daggers at the old man, furious that Diaden is hoarding the only hydration without sharing the secret. Finally connecting the dots that the master used his spread-out cloak to catch morning dew, Bro resorts to desperately licking his own damp sleeves for a single drop of moisture. Swearing silent vengeance and promising to pay the geezer back once he levels up, his internal monologue is abruptly cut short by Diaden calling him out. Furious at the insult, Zeon snaps back, but Diaden completely ignores the outburst, his expression turning dead serious as he asks if his student can sense the approaching threat. Xian freezes, completely baffled by Diaden's sudden warning. But then the ground beneath his boots starts to tremble. A cold sweat breaks out as he realizes the tremors aren't coming from just one direction. Out of the darkness, dozens of glowing red eyes surround them, cutting off every possible escape route. Diaden casually identifies the beasts as great horned hyenas, a nocturnal pack hunting right at dawn. Instead of drawing his blade, the old master mocks his new disciple, asking if he needs saving again. With a vicious snarl, the monstrous pack lunges forward to tear them apart. Flashing a confident grin, Xian rejects the offer entirely. Throwing his arms wide, our hero declares he's going to survive this hellhole on his own terms. Channeling every ounce of his newly awakened mana, he weaves the sand around his fingertips. Massive spikes of hardened earth erupt from the ground, violently launching the charging beasts into the air. His eyes glow with raw power as he pushes his limits further than ever before. Towering pillars of rock tear through the battlefield, impaling the monsters without mercy. Yet the victory is short-lived as more hyenas pour in, leaving him screaming in pure frustration at their endless numbers. Clutching his chest in exhaustion, Xian realizes his mana is draining too fast. He needs a strategy right now, or he's dead meat. Staring down a massive horde of glowing red eyes, Xian quickly realizes that raw power won't save him here. He needs absolute efficiency and strict mana management to survive. Our boy focuses on the sand swirling in his palm, desperately racking his brain for a way to stretch his limited energy. But before he can finalize a plan, a horned beast lunges straight at his blind spot. Furious at the interruption, our hero slams his fist into the monster's face, screaming at the cowardly mutt for breaking his concentration. Glancing down at his arm, Bro winces at a fresh puncture wound left by the beast's teeth, muttering about the new hole in his flesh. Watching the dark blood drip from the injury, a sudden twisted epiphany hits him. The rest of the pack refuses to give him breathing room, charging forward in a terrifying wave of claws and fangs. Standing perfectly still against the overwhelming tide of monsters, Xian doesn't even flinch. His strategy finally clicks into place. He doesn't need to completely obliterate his enemies, he just needs to punch a single hole through them. Flashing a sinister grin, Xian unleashes a barrage of concentrated sand spikes from his fingertips, effortlessly impaling multiple hyenas at once. Throwing his head back in manic laughter, our boy revels in the brutal efficiency of his new technique. Realizing a pierced brain is just as dead as an exploded one. Surrounded by the remaining beasts, he anchors his focus, fully understanding that wasting mana in a battle is a guaranteed death sentence. Tearing through the leaping monsters with surgical precision, Xian maximizes his lethality while keeping his energy costs at rock bottom. Just as he thinks he's mastered the art of efficiency, a booming familiar laugh echoes across the battlefield and completely shatters his focus. We cut over to Diaden, who is casually letting a massive hyena gnaw on his armored arm, mocking the ferocious beast for barely even tickling him. Tiring of the pathetic nibbling, the armored powerhouse violently snatches the beast by its throat, roaring at the overgrown mutt with explosive aggression. Right beside him, Diaden stands surrounded by the pack, laughing like a maniac as he readies his massive weapon. Seeing that unhinged grin, Xian panics. He knows exactly what's coming next. With a furious roar, the veteran warrior unleashes his full, terrifying power. A devastating shockwave obliterates the battlefield, tearing the very earth apart in a storm of red energy. Caught dead in the crossfire, Xian screams as he creates a sand wall to defend against the sheer impact of the attack, while the monster hurls through the air like a ragdoll. Sweating bullets, our hero is absolutely appalled, unable to believe this crazy old geezer just unleashed a literal nuke without giving a single damn about collateral damage. When the smoke finally clears, a colossal jagged fissure scars the landscape, proving just how monstrous that strike really was. Standing amidst the shredded remains of the pack, an onlooker can barely comprehend how anyone could pull off that level of destruction without even activating a skill. Realizing he needs to lay low before he gets himself killed, the young man tries to hide, only to freeze when a vicious bark echoes right behind him. Meanwhile, the old man casually takes a seat right on top of the struggling alpha female, annoyed that the pack leader is making such a pathetic fuss. Suddenly, the victory lap is cut short when an enormous crackling energy looms over him, radiating pure hostility. For the first time, the veteran breaks a sweat. Realizing this new monstrosity is projecting a force field, marking it as a deadly B-rank threat or higher. Dwarfed by the colossal wolf beast and its blinding white lightning, the old warrior suddenly finds himself staring down an overwhelming force. Desperate, Xian screams out a warning to Diaden, terrified that this might actually be the end. Diaden doesn't even flinch as the beast's raw lightning crackles straight into his bare hand. Xian just stands there, his brain completely short-circuiting at the impossible sight. The old swordsman actually sits down, treating a lethal energy blast like a deep tissue massage. But the relaxation ends fast. Diaden's eyes glow crimson as he decides playtime is over. With a single devastating punch, he obliterates the massive creature, pinning him down in the dirt. Our boy wisely decides to protect his own mental health by completely ignoring the horrific splatter behind him. Turning back with a massive horn in hand, Diaden seems genuinely surprised his new disciple is still breathing. He casually explains that the great horned hyena's loot carries innate lightning properties, perfect for forging a high-tier weapon. Out of nowhere, a blade whizzes right past Zeon's ear, slicing through the air before he can even blink. The veteran lays down the new law. From this moment on, the kid is hunting for his own meals. Tossing out a quick survival tip, the master notes that while the beast's muscle is highly toxic, the flank meat is perfectly safe. Before Zeon can fully process the lesson, the old man barks at him to get moving before dawn breaks. A vast, unforgiving desert stretches out before them, bathed in the harsh light of the rising sun. Despite the brutal conditions, our hero is actually in high spirits, happily munching on his newly acquired rations. Zeon's makeshift bag is absolutely stuffed with dried meat, giving him a rare moment of genuine satisfaction. Throw in his newly activated sand step skill, and Bro is literally gliding across the treacherous dunes with glowing boots, making this brutal trek feel like an absolute breeze. Feeling pretty good about himself, our boy can't resist poking fun at Diaden, teasing the old master about his age. Annoyed, Diaden unleashes a swift punch to shut him up, but this guy effortlessly slips past the strike, sticking his tongue out and loudly bragging about his flawless evasion. But that overconfidence is short-lived, and Zeon quickly finds himself face-planted in the dirt while Diaden grumbles about his inflated ego. Spitting out a mouthful of grit, our hero whines about his punishment, reminding the old man that they're both dying of thirst out here. Suddenly, Zeon stops mid-complaint, his enhanced senses picking up a faint trace of moisture in the dry air. Zeon thinks his mind is playing tricks on him, until he notices Diaden staring intently in the exact same direction. Scrambling up the nearest dune, the two of them gaze toward the glowing horizon, hoping against hope that the rumors are true. Just beyond the ridge, the harsh desert landscape begins to shift. Cresting the peak, both master and student freeze as they take in the sight below. Zeon's face lights up with pure, unadulterated joy. It's not a mirage. Nestled right in the middle of the scorching sands is a massive, crystal-clear oasis. Without a second thought, Bro practically surfs down the slope, desperate for his first drink of water in days. Diaden just clicks his tongue, watching his reckless apprentice charge ahead without checking for danger. Ignoring any potential threats, Zeon sprints the final stretch, completely consumed by the promise of hydration. Plunging face first into the oasis, Zeon finally gets a taste of heaven. The cool liquid soaks into his battered body, washing away the brutal desert heat. Our boy just lies there at the edge of the pool, letting the freezing relief seep into his bones after days of 50-degree torture. But mid-celebration, his eyes snap wide open beneath the surface. Deep in the murky depths, a strange warm light pulses like a beacon. Staring into the glow, a heavy wave of unnatural exhaustion suddenly washes over him. A furious scream shatters the hypnotic trance, ordering the idiot to wake up. Diaden comes sprinting down the sand dune like an absolute madman, panic written all over his face. Still dipping his face in the water, our boy ignores all the shout by Diaden. He has no idea that a colossal, terrifying anglerfish beast is lurking just inches beneath him, using that warm light as bait. Before the jaws can snap shut, a heavy gauntlet violently yanks his collar. Massive waves erupt as the monstrous predator lunges forward, missing its prey by a hair thanks to the swordsman's quick reflexes. Thrown clear of the strike zone, Bro hits the sand, completely horrified by the nightmare that almost swallowed him whole. Without missing a beat, Diaden launches himself straight at the towering beast, drawing his massive blade midair. Diaden locks both hands tightly around the hilt, ready to carve this oversized fish into pieces. Diaden unleashes a devastating strike, obliterating the illusion and the beast in one fell swoop. Completely drenched, Zeon can only stare in absolute awe at the sheer scale of the swordsman's power. As the dust settles and a rainbow arcs through the artificial rain, the terrifying truth of the oasis is laid bare. The old master casually explains that the creature is a sand maw, a predator that uses a mirage to lure unsuspecting prey straight into its jaws. But the impromptu lesson takes a sudden dark turn as Diaden glares down at his student. Without warning, he delivers a brutal right hook, sending our boy crashing into the dirt. Holding his bruised cheek, Zeon is forced to endure a blistering lecture about forgetting his training. The swordsman makes it painfully clear. Relying on a tiny bit of adaptability in this hellscape is a guaranteed death sentence. Thoroughly chastised, the kid lowers his head in submission, prompting a heavy, exhausted sigh from his mentor. Turning away from the pathetic display, Diaden orders Zeon to get to work and skin the massive carcass. He details how a C-rank sand maw's belly is incredibly soft and elastic, making it the perfect material to craft a protective robe. Missing the point entirely, our hero innocently asks if the old man needs a new outfit, pushing Diaden's patience past its absolute limit. Grabbing the boy by the collar, the master explodes, screaming that the robe is for Zeon and questioning if someone cast a corrosion spell on his brain. With his eardrums practically bleeding from the sheer volume of the rant, Zeon manages a weak, awkward apology. Calming down slightly, Diaden gestures to the massive corpse, noting that despite its monstrous mutations, the beast shares a striking resemblance to the fish of old Earth. Diaden casually mentions that this colossal desert monster is actually just a fish. Zeon's brain short-circuits trying to process that absurd piece of trivia. Without missing a beat, Zeon plunges his dagger straight into the beast's thick hide, while he mutters about how terrifying fish really are. Watching the eccentric swordsman gleefully hack away while joking about giving the dead beast a back scratch is just too much for our hero, who frantically screams at him to stop so he can handle the butchering himself. Standing before the massive carcass, our boy quickly realizes standard tools aren't going to pierce that armor. Gripping the hilt with both hands, he focuses his energy, determined to make this work. By infusing raw mana directly into the metal, he drastically sharpens its cutting power. He carefully carves down a piece of the monster's fin, shaping it into a makeshift needle. Pulling a tough tendon from the flesh, he threads it perfectly to use as heavy-duty stitching wire. For a second, a spark of pure inspiration lights up his eyes as the plan comes together. But reality hits hard. His first attempt is an absolute disaster, leaving Diaden highly amused by the ruined garbage. Refusing to give up, Xion grinds his teeth and dives right back into the pile of materials for another try. Hours pass under the bleak, cloudy sky of the dungeon. Finally, after relentless trial and error, our hero hoists up a perfectly stitched heavy-duty dark cloak. Xion proudly admires his handiwork, joking about opening his own boutique. Completely oblivious to the massive, dripping chunk of flesh Diaden is hauling over. Startled by a sudden bark from the old man, Bro practically jumps out of his skin, fiercely clutching his prize creation and screaming that he won't let anyone take it. The eccentric swordsman shoves a massive, dripping chunk of flesh toward our hero, ordering him to eat it without question. Disgust washes over Xion's face as Diaden explains that this grotesque mass is a sandworm gallbladder, a rare medicine that must be consumed entirely. Flashing a menacing smile and a quick throat-slitting gesture, the old master gives him a simple ultimatum: eat the entire thing or die right here. Grumbling internally, our boy begrudgingly reaches out to take the heavy, foul-smelling organ from his terrifying mentor. A heavy gulp echoes in the quiet cavern as he braces himself for the worst culinary experience of his life. Choosing a bitter meal over a brutal beating, Xion chomps down aggressively on the fleshy mass. But as he chews, a wave of sheer confusion replaces his initial revulsion. Instead of a dense meal, the texture is completely bizarre. Light as a cloud, melting away instantly without filling his stomach at all. Relieved by the strange consistency, he quickly polishes off the last bite, completely unaware of what's coming next. Sitting calmly by the fire, Diaden casually drops a terrifying warning: it's time for his student to burn to death. Before Xion can even process the threat, a searing, fiery pattern erupts right across his chest. Agonizing screams tear from his throat as thick smoke begins pouring directly off his skin. Clutching his neck in sheer panic, he realizes this isn't just normal heat. Something inside him is boiling alive. Xion's entire mana circuit goes completely berserk, radiating a blinding red glow as he feels like a miniature sun is trying to tear its way out of his stomach. While Xion screams his lungs out, Diaden just sits there, coldly telling him to endure the agony. Instead of helping, the old man stares into the fire, casually philosophizing about the fleeting nature of the oasis. He notes how even in this desolate place, the colossal sandworms find a way to be reborn. But Xion isn't exactly in the mood for a poetry reading, thrashing wildly as the pain tears through him. Smoke literally rises from his skin as he begs for his life, desperate for the master to stop the torment. Diaden just glances back, completely unfazed by the agonizing display. The sheer absurdity of the situation boils over into a screaming match, with the swordsman bluntly telling his student to shut up so he can sleep. Sometime later, our hero finally regains consciousness, his vision blurry as he reaches out across the unfamiliar sand. And the first thing he sees is Diaden's grinning face hovering upside down right above him. Xion scrambles backward in pure panic, nearly having a heart attack from the sudden jump scare. Brushing off the dirt, he glares at the old man, making it clear he didn't sleep. He passed out from the sheer torture. Ignoring the attitude, Diaden simply asks the boy to take a good look at his own physical state. At first glance, everything seems normal, until Xion clenches his fist and feels an undeniable shift. His muscles are suddenly dense as steel wire, and deep inside his chest a massive storm of mana is violently swirling. Standing amidst the shifting grains, Xion stares at his hands in absolute awe, struggling to comprehend the monstrous power he just awakened. Diaden finally reveals the secret behind Xion's sudden growth spurt. It was all thanks to the sandworm's gallbladder. Tossing a piece into his mouth, the swordsman explains that this rare medicine grants the power to endure the harsh desert sun, making it as valuable as a pure mana stone. Xion's jaw drops in pure disbelief, completely stunned that his new master would just hand over something so incredibly priceless. But Diaden quickly shuts down any sentimental thoughts, bluntly stating he only shared the loot because he refuses to drag around dead weight. Embracing his new role with comical enthusiasm, our boy promises to be reliable, while his master simply orders him to sit down and finish eating the colossal beast. 4 days pass under the scorching desert sun as the duo camps out by the massive carcass. Staring up at the picked clean skeleton, Diaden notes with satisfaction that the monster provided way more sustenance than he initially expected. With their bellies full and their supplies sorted, the white-haired warrior signals that it's time to hit the road once again. Fired up and ready for whatever comes next, Zeon eagerly falls into step right behind him. The wasteland wastes no time testing their resolve, whipping up a massive sandstorm to block their path. Trudging through the howling winds, our hero casually munches on some leftover jerky, completely unbothered by the harsh conditions. He realizes that thanks to his newly awakened sand manipulation ability, the abrasive gale just feels like a refreshing summer breeze against his skin. Meanwhile, Bro can't help but stare as Deiden plows through the monstrous storm like an absolute machine, refusing to take even a single second to rest. Baffled by the dead silence, this guy starts to wonder if his eccentric new master is going through menopause or something, considering the old man hasn't uttered a single syllable in days. Dragging his feet after 2 grueling weeks of non-stop marching, our hero is seriously starting to doubt if Deiden actually has a destination in mind or if they're just wandering blind. Right as Bro starts screaming that the crazy old man definitely got them lost, a colossal red-eyed insectoid violently erupts from the sand right behind him. Without even turning around, our boy casually flicks a finger and swats the screeching beast away with his sandblast. The brutal journey is clearly taking its toll, leaving him hacking and utterly exhausted as he trudges forward. But his complaints are cut short when something shifts in his periphery. That giant ant from earlier refuses to stay down, its cracked carapace clicking aggressively as Zeon notes its annoying durability. A glowing sensory grid expands beneath his boots, confirming that a peaceful detour is completely off the table. Through his newly awakened mana perception, the terrifying reality sets in. He is completely boxed in by an entire swarm of these monsters. Unfazed by the overwhelming odds, our boy drops into a low stance with one hand pressed to the dirt, his eyes flashing a fierce yellow as swirling sand answers his taunt for the swarm to hurry up and attack. Knowing Deiden will probably kill him if he falls behind, he stomps his hand down to draw the creatures out. The monstrous swarm immediately takes the bait, closing the circle with deafening screeches and snapping mandibles. Bro doesn't even flinch, gathering the sand into his palms and unleashes Sandblaster. A colossal geyser of pressurized grit erupts from the ground, instantly obliterating the ambushers in a devastating upward blast. When the dust settles, Zeon casually brushes off his coat, noting that a desert environment is basically an unlimited arsenal for his abilities. His moment of triumph vanishes the second he looks up and spots his so-called master sprinting away into the distance, leaving him completely behind. As Zeon screams insults at the retreating Deiden, the ominous clicking of surviving mandibles reminds him this battle hasn't finished yet. Sliding down a massive dune, Zeon quickly backtracks on his previous complaints. But mid-apology, the system pings. His newly awakened mana detection flares within a 10-meter radius. Ever since surviving the Crimson Drake, our boy has kept his senses dialed to the absolute max. Yet the signature creeping up on him right now doesn't feel like a normal monster. A colossal, terrifying presence looms over the desert, radiating pure dread instead of standard magic. In a flash, the dunes erupt as a monstrous swarm of giant black ants breaches the surface. Scrambling backward, Zeon is completely baffled by the sheer size of this subterranean army. Panic sets in, and he immediately screams out for Deiden to step in. The eccentric swordsman just sits there on a distant rock, completely unbothered by the chaos. Gritting his teeth, our hero realizes he can't keep crying out for a savior every time things get rough. Connecting the dots, he figures the old man definitely sensed this swarm, meaning this is a deliberate, twisted training exercise. A crazed, confident smirk spreads across his face as he declares that a bug is still just a bug no matter the numbers. Without hesitation, he launches himself straight into the heart of the swarm. Adrenaline pumping, Bro charges forward, ready to test his limits. Before Zeon can even land a strike, a massive ant intercepts his path, catching him completely off guard. Zeon instantly regrets his confidence as he's sent tumbling backward over one of the massive beasts. Upside down and flailing, our boy screams at the swarm for ganging up on him like cowards. But his complaints fall on deaf ears as he plummets straight into a sea of clicking mandibles. A massive explosion of sand and light erupts from the impact zone. Dust chokes the cavern while the terrifying sound of countless crawling legs echoes through the dark. Using his sand manipulation, Zeon launches himself skyward on a floating slab of rock. Looking down, the sheer scale of the nightmare hits him. The entire desert is crawling with them. Gritting his teeth, our hero formulates a desperate plan to gain altitude, banking on the fact that ants can't fly. Before he can even finish the thought, a brutal impact cuts him off. One of the giant insects leaps with terrifying leg strength, intercepting him mid-air. Shock drains the color from his face as he realizes his aerial escape route is completely useless. Screeching aggressively, the monstrous beast slams into him with full force. Knocked off his makeshift platform, Bro is sent plummeting back down into the abyss. He takes a devastating blow on the way down, blood splattering as the impact shatters his defenses. Crashing into the dirt, Zeon coughs up blood, completely surrounded by an endless horde of monsters with nowhere left to run. Zeon freezes, his blood-stained face tilting upward as a massive presence registers. Deiden sits there like an immovable mountain, watching our boy with crossed arms. A manic, blood-soaked grin stretches across Zeon's face. With a monstrous ant looming right behind him, Our hero vows to show the old man exactly how he plans to survive. The swordsman doesn't flinch as the earth erupts around him, clearly amused by the kid's sheer audacity. He knows Zeon's sand manipulation is a rare gift in this ruined world, one that could easily buy a comfortable life. But Diadon sees the trap in that comfort. A dead end for true potential. Looking out over the desolate landscape, the old man despises the modern system, believing true awakened must forge their own skills. To him, the current academies are nothing more than factories churning out standardized weak-willed clones. Seating calmly, Diadon recalls the day he can't forget in his whole life. Exactly a century ago, the world as they knew it was completely obliterated by an apocalyptic tragedy. In that horrific vision, he watches helplessly as countless innocent lives are snuffed out in the flames. Absolute devastation spared no one, taking his colleagues, his friends, and his entire family. Heartbreak echoes through his words as he recalls reaching out for his daughter, utterly powerless to save her. Snapping back to the present, Diadon looks at Zeon, a kid who refuses to be helpless, standing defiant against a swarm of monsters. Diadon's philosophy is simple. Push past the limits of mortality and true power will follow. The eccentric swordsman watches with a feral grin, waiting to see the results of this brutal trial. And our boy is rising to the occasion, summoning a massive vortex of sand that threatens to swallow the entire battlefield. A manic energy takes over Zeon's face as he taunts the swarm, fully embracing the chaos. Unfazed by the display, the insectoid monsters continue their relentless advance. Compressing the desert around him, our hero forms an ultra-high-pressure sand missile, combining gravity and wind into one lethal package. With a single motion, he unleashes the devastating barrage. Those projectiles crash into the horde with earth-shattering force. Massive shockwaves of sand erupt across the wasteland, multiplying his raw destructive power tenfold. Zeon roars in absolute triumph, declaring the monsters finished. He stands amidst the swirling debris, gloating that their biggest mistake was letting him live long enough to grow this strong. Watching from the sidelines, Diadon just chuckles at the kid's explosive enthusiasm. As the dust begins to settle, Bro catches his breath, the sheer exertion of the attack finally catching up to him. What was once a swarming battlefield is now nothing but a desolate, cratered wasteland. Clenching his fist, Zeon lets out an unhinged laugh, completely intoxicated by the adrenaline of his own overwhelming strength. Zeon's gloating is cut brutally short when a massive dark appendage impales him right through the chest. The true nightmare reveals itself. A colossal insectoid beast that somehow bypassed all his heightened senses. Gripping the spike tearing through his flesh, Zeon realizes this isn't some high-tier stealth skill at work but a deadly poison. He deduces that the venom has been silently blocking his mana points, leaving him completely vulnerable. Furious at being outplayed by a mindless beast, he screams in absolute defiance despite the fatal wound. Unfazed by his outburst, the monster unleashes a blinding flurry of spiked strikes. In a fraction of a second, the fight is over, and a cold wave of defeat washes over him. When he finally regains consciousness, he finds himself dumped face down in the pitch-black depths of the ant's nest. Bleeding and helpless, he can only watch as a pale, grotesque larva slowly slithers toward him. Worse still, dozens of the ravenous grubs emerge from the shadows, drawn by the scent of fresh meat. Before he can even twitch a muscle, the first larva sinks its mandibles deep into his exposed arm. Hungry jaws begin to tear away his flesh, feeding on him piece by agonizing piece. Completely paralyzed by the venom, he is forced to endure the horrific reality of being eaten alive. Tears of blood stream down his face as the last shred of hope leaves his body. Staring blankly into the dark, Zeon waits for the end, wondering if his life is about to flash before his eyes. Those grotesque giant larvae inch closer, their sickening screeches echoing through the dark as they prepare to feast on our boy. Suddenly, a fist slams into the dirt, crushing one of the grubs instantly. The sickening crunch alerts the adult ants, their glowing red eyes locking onto the disturbance. Surrounded by larvae, Zeon forces his paralyzed body upward, cursing his rotten luck. Fueled by pure, unadulterated rage at his miserable life, our hero refuses to let this be his end. As he screams at the monstrous swarm, the mysterious geometric markings on his arm ignite with blinding light. A colossal shockwave of sand started to gather, violently blasting the larva away. Even the massive adult ants stagger back, completely caught off guard by the sudden eruption. That sheer kinetic force tosses the giant insects through the air like absolute ragdolls. Jagged chunks of the cavern floor are ripped upward, tearing the environment to shreds. As the swirling dust clears, our boy stands dead center in a massive smoking crater, completely unfazed by the apocalyptic devastation around him. Staring at his trembling hands, he realizes the impossible. His rank just jumped, his stigma is gone, and his core is overflowing with boundless mana. Two brilliant lines now pulse across his skin, leaving him wondering if his very biology just evolved. This isn't just a minor upgrade. The raw power coursing through his veins makes his old F-rank self look like a joke. But even with this monstrous new strength, a chilling realization suddenly hits Zeon. Zeon freezes in his tracks, staring up at the colossal beast without a single scratch on its rocky shell. Before our hero can even process the impossible defense, the monster lunges forward and sends him skidding across the dirt. Gritting his teeth, our boy barely dodges the attack and unleashed a barrage of sand missile, realizing this creature's raw strength is completely off the charts. This thing's impenetrable armor absorbs every impact like it's absolutely nothing. Dropping to his hands and knees, Xian is completely overwhelmed by the sheer durability of his opponent. Frustration boils over as he digs his fingers into the soil, knowing his current tactics are completely useless. Staring down the looming threat, Bro accepts a grim reality. Striking this beast is just a waste of energy. Refusing to give up, he reaches out, desperately trying to formulate a strategy to bypass the unbreakable defense. A wild idea sparks in his mind. If he can't shatter or pierce the rocky shell, he'll just have to rip it apart by force. Suddenly the sand around him surrounds the monster from every direction. His eye glows with feral intensity as he applies every ounce of his monstrous strength, determined to twist the armor right off its body. Thrashing wildly, the giant insect screeches in agony as the brutal twisting force begins to take its toll. A blinding flash of light erupts from between the creature's mandibles as it supposedly forms a powerful attack in his defense. This attack was not some kind of a power attack, it's a type of a sound attack. Caught in the deafening blast, our boy goes completely feral, baring jagged teeth as he unleashes a monstrous madman's roar to fight sound with sound. Blood streams down from his ear as he notices it's a high-frequency sound wave. Shockwave of attack erupts across the battlefield as the monster increases the power. Gritting his teeth, our hero realizes the beast was holding back a deadly trump card this entire time. But instead of backing down, he glares right back, fully prepared to meet the creature's ultimate attack head-on. The clash devolves into a chaotic blur of motion, with both combatants throwing everything they have into one final desperate strike. Every shockwave threatens to tear the cavern apart as they trade devastating earth-shattering blows. Screaming through the immense pain, Xian unleashes every last ounce of his remaining strength to tear the monster apart. Then the explosive light fades, leaving our boy drifting through a dark void as gravity finally reclaims him. Consciousness slowly returns, bringing with it the agonizing realization that his muscles are completely unresponsive. Reaching a trembling hand upward, he curses the physical limits that have finally caught up to him. Frustration washes over him as his exhausted limbs give out entirely, sending him plummeting backward. Before he can hit the ground, a familiar armored arm catches him mid-fall, accompanied by a blunt insult about his frailty. Diaden looks down at his battered pupil with an amused smirk, playfully scolding the kid for trying to take a nap in a dungeon. A weak, relieved smile creeps across Xian's blood-stained face as he recognizes the eccentric old swordsman. Even half dead, Xian manages to crack a joke about leaving the final blow to his master, earning a hearty laugh and a rare shred of genuine praise from Diaden. Diaden stands over the slain C-rank Queen Ant, praising Xian for fighting back in the face of certain death. But our hero can only offer a weak smile, revealing that the brutal battle completely destroyed his eardrums. Annoyed by the inconvenience, the old master simply grabs him by the collar and starts dragging him across the cavern. Completely deaf to whatever Diaden is saying, the kid is left utterly confused about their sudden departure. They approach a massive crater in the ruins, where a strange glowing purple orb rests among the rubble. Xian stares at the bizarre object, his curiosity temporarily overriding his sheer exhaustion. He points at the glowing sphere, desperately trying to ask his master what they've stumbled upon. Since talking is off the table, Diaden uses sand to write a simple instruction on the wall. Eat the queen's egg, it's strawberry-flavored medicine. Reading the gruesome message, our boy is absolutely horrified at the thought of consuming raw monster spawn. Staring back at the pulsing purple orb, he questions if stomaching such a thing is even biologically possible. Hesitant, he asks the exhausted swordsman if this is going to make him violently ill like his last monster-eating experience. Diaden casually mentions that eating it will probably kill him. A fatal warning that falls on completely deaf ears. Figuring he has nothing left to lose, Xian leans in and gives the glowing egg a tentative lick. Having lived in the slums his whole life, he braces himself, admitting he doesn't even know what a strawberry is supposed to taste like. Instantly, Xian's face lights up with pure ecstasy. Turns out monster eggs are freaking delicious. Xian's moment of triumph shatters as a sickening sensation suddenly grips his stomach. Without warning, massive crimson spikes violently erupt from his torso, tearing through his flesh as he collapses in pure agony. This is the horrific reality of organ inversion. A brutal mutation where a person's intestines literally twist and turn themselves inside out. The glowing orb he just swallowed wasn't a prize at all, but a highly toxic queen ant's egg. Consuming even a fraction of it guarantees a slow, agonizing death as thorns pierce through every vital organ. Blood pouring from his mouth, our hero screams out in terror, demanding to know what the old man just fed him. But Diaden doesn't even flinch, casually picking his ear and telling the kid to get used to the pain if he wants to survive in this hellish world. Choking on his own blood, our boy is completely baffled by how anyone could possibly get used to their own body tearing itself apart. A violent fit of coughing racks his broken frame, forcing dark corrupted liquid up his throat. Staring at his trembling blood-soaked hand, the grim reality of his fatal mistake finally sets in. Drifting into a bitter memory, Xian flashes back to just moments ago when he sat by the fire, genuinely believing he had finally found a mentor he could trust. In that fleeting vision of safety, he thought his miserable life was turning around, only to realize he was nothing but a gullible fool for letting his guard down. Snapping back to the cold present, his body gives out completely, collapsing motionless into the dirt as the poison takes its toll. With the boy seemingly dead, the eccentric swordsman simply turns his back and walks over to the massive insect carcass. Showing zero remorse, Dronzer violently plunges his bare hand straight into the dead monster's abdomen. Digging through the gore, he searches for the true reward of this brutal battle. He yanks out a glowing, slime-covered crystal, the true reward for all this bloodshed. A greedy grin spreads across the swordsman's face as he realizes this high-grade monostone is an absolute jackpot compared to the trash from the mines. Pragmatic as ever, he decides the giant ant's remains are too valuable to leave behind and prepares to harvest the rest. But right as he's packing up, a subtle shift in the air catches his attention from behind. His expression darkens as he quietly addresses an unseen companion. Our hero lies completely motionless, impaled on red spikes, while Dronzer coldly rationalizes that the weak are simply fated to die. Without an ounce of hesitation, the eccentric master turns his back on the fallen boy. Walking away into the dark tunnel, Dronzer mutters that they are running out of time, seemingly leaving Xion to his grim fate. The world blurs back into focus as Xion's consciousness slowly returns, his mind struggling to comprehend how he's even still breathing. Suddenly, Dronzer's grinning face fills his vision, mercilessly mocking the battered kid for taking a dirt nap. An explosive shockwave of dust and debris violently interrupts the one-sided conversation. Standing amidst the settling cloud, the veteran swordsman looks thoroughly annoyed that his dramatic moment was ruined. Xion fires back a sarcastic remark, catching the older man completely off guard. Refusing to stay down, Xion unleashes a vicious barrage of glowing projectiles straight at his so-called savior. Dronzer doesn't even flinch as the barrage flies right past him, casually telling Xion to knock it off. But the young awakened isn't listening, his voice trembling with rage as he demands an explanation. Another massive sand attack erupts as he screams out, asking why his mentor just tried to murder him. Raw fury completely takes over, tearing through the cavern with pure destructive force. With his eyes glowing a blinding white, our boy declares that he will never forgive this betrayal. He unleashes everything he has left, bringing the very ceiling of the dungeon crashing down. Tons of jagged stone plummet toward the ground in a desperate earth-shattering strike. And with the absolute full force, Xion delivered a devastating strike. Gasping for air, Bro struggles to stay on his feet, completely drained from the massive output of mana. Our hero tries to press the issue again, only to be cut off by a deeply annoyed sigh echoing through the dust. Standing completely unharmed amidst the rubble, Dronzer scolds him for letting the ant egg's toxins mess with his brain. Xion is absolutely baffled. His ultimate attack didn't even leave a single scratch on the old monster. The eccentric swordsman drops some harsh logic. If he actually wanted his student dead, a simple flick of his finger would have done the job. That blunt truth hits the kid right in the chest, and he reluctantly admits the old man has a solid point. Pointing to the oozing mass, Dronzer explains that while the queen ant's egg is a lethal venom, surviving it turns the substance into a divine medicine that completely purges all impurities from the body. Dronzer explains the true purpose of the ant's egg. It wasn't just a snack, it was meant to flood Xion's empty core with raw mana. Looking down at his glowing hands, our boy realizes his mana capacity hasn't just increased. It's completely exploded. The sheer magnitude of the gift hits him all at once, and his eyes well up with sudden emotion. Without a second thought, Xion tackles the old swordsman into a tearful hug, sobbing out apologies for ever doubting his crazy methods. Dronzer immediately tries to peel the crying kid off his armor, but Xion is too busy celebrating the fact that his shattered eardrums are fully healed. The legendary warrior grumbles about grown men crying like babies, demanding his personal space back. But beneath the annoyance, Dronzer quietly acknowledges the truth to himself. While Xion wipes his face, thinking he's successfully buttered up his terrifying mentor, the older man's thoughts are far colder. He knows it was a massive gamble on a weak kid, and if Xion doesn't get strong fast, he'll be completely useless for what's coming. Suddenly, Dronzer scoops our hero up under his arm like a sack of potatoes, cheerfully telling him not to forgive him just yet. Xion's brief moment of relief evaporates instantly as panic sets back in. A massive menacing grin spreads across the old man's face. Pointing straight up toward the cave ceiling, Dronzer casually mentions that they're short on time and need to make a quick exit. Every instinct in Xion's body screams that this is going to hurt. Meanwhile, far above the subterranean chaos, two scorpions rest quietly on the vast desert surface. A massive pillar of force violently erupts from beneath the desert sands, shattering the quiet landscape. The eccentric swordsman, Dronzer, launches himself through the sky with a maniacal laugh, carrying a terrified Xion like a sack of potatoes while our boy screams for a normal mode of transport. Grinning from ear to ear, the old man bluntly reminds his new apprentice that this extreme rush is the price for sleeping 4 days straight. Mid-taunt, the seasoned warrior's expression shifts as something massive catches his eye on the horizon. Drained and dangling in mid-air, Xion mutters that absolutely nothing could possibly shock him at this point. But the universe immediately proves him wrong as his eyes widen in pure, unadulterated disbelief. Dwarfing the two flying figures, a colossal stone-shelled turtle slowly lumbers across the barren wasteland. Impressed by the sheer scale of the magic beast, Xion noting that it's at least 30 kilometers away and still looks like a moving mountain. Touching down on the dunes, the veteran identifies the towering behemoth as the mobile fortress, Archelon. Breaking down the lore, he explains that while it's technically a rank B monster, its impenetrable shell rivals rank A defenses, making it the perfect tame transport for those bold enough to modify it. Our hero is completely baffled, struggling to wrap his head around the fact that actual humans ride this walking natural disaster. Staring up at the impossible creature, the young man realizes just how small he truly is in this vast, unforgiving world. With his arms crossed, Diaden delivers a sobering reality check. There are beings out there powerful enough to treat a beast like that as a mere beast of burden. Diaden commands his student to burn this awe-inspiring image into his memory, setting the benchmark for the perilous journey ahead. Suddenly, up high beneath a cloudy sky, a mysterious white-haired figure suddenly drops from the monster's back, signaling that their peaceful moment won't last long. The airborne stranger touches down with earth-shattering force, kicking up a blinding pillar of dust that forces Diaden and Xion to shield their eyes. Through the settling sand, Diaden notes that the distance made it hard to be sure but recognize his target. Our boy is completely caught off guard, but his master quickly orders him to freeze. The haze clears to reveal an imposing elder sporting a monocle and a massive white beard, calmly greeting the veteran swordsman like a ghost from his past. Diaden breaks into a massive grin, pointing a finger as he casually identifies the newcomer as Pavilsa. Unfazed by the enthusiastic welcome, the monocled elder dryly notes that Diaden is the freak of nature for still moving like a young man at his age. Curiosity takes over as Diaden questions why his old acquaintance has abandoned his territory, prompting Pavilsa to admit he's dodging a scavenger infestation. Mockery immediately follows, with the swordsman laughing at the idea of running from mere scavengers, only to be sharply called an ignorant brute in return. Caught in the middle of this clash of titans, our boy can only sweat, wondering how these ancient geezers possess such terrifying auras. Deciding he's had enough of the banter, Pavilsa turns away and lets out a piercing whistle that echoes across the wasteland. A massive shadow falls over them, leaving Xion completely speechless at the sheer scale of what just emerged from the dust. Before them stands the colossal Archelon, a living fortress that Pavilsa commands them to board without delay. Feeling entirely out of his depth, the young apprentice shrinks into his cloak, trying to make himself as small as possible. Staring up into the creature's massive, unblinking eye, he makes a firm mental note to keep his mouth shut and stay out of trouble. But his attempt at stealth fails when the monocled elder finally spots him, curiously asking if the kid is some kind of subordinate. Instead of a proper introduction, Diaden hoists his student up by the scruff of his neck, jokingly claiming he picked up some trash to help the environment. Chuckling as he scales the rope ladder, Pavilsa finds it absolutely hilarious that a lone wolf like Diaden is actually dragging a companion around. With a deadpan expression, the old man declares that hell must have frozen over for this to happen. Completely tuning out the old man's banter, our boy is absolutely staggered, his jaw hitting the floor as he finally processes the mind-bending sight right in front of them. Bathed in brilliant shafts of sunlight piercing the cavern ceiling, a sprawling, bustling metropolis stretches out before them, leaving Bro completely baffled as he stammers out a desperate question about what kind of impossible world they just walked into. The old swordsman casually explains that this entire bustling civilization is the Moat clan, a massive family tree consisting entirely of Pavilsa's descendants. But Diaden doesn't hold back his disdain, bluntly calling the inhabitants a bunch of arrogant fools who would be completely helpless without the giant beast protecting them. Hearing his legacy insulted so casually, the monocled elder turns back with a sharp glare, demanding to know what gives his old acquaintance the right to talk down to them. Marching forward, Diaden ruthlessly doubles down, declaring that the clan is nothing but dead weight destined to be abandoned by the fortress the second Pavilsa kicks the bucket. Rather than escalating the bitter argument, the clan leader simply falls silent, deciding to shelve the grim reality check for another time. Relocating to a private ornate room to conduct their actual business, Pavilsa finally asks to inspect the merchandise they came to trade. With a confident smirk, Diaden raises his hand, conjuring a swirling black vortex of subspace magic right at his back. A massive glittering hoard of gold, rare weapons and monstrous skulls immediately pours out, forming a mountain of flawless loot. Staring at the sheer volume of wealth, our hero nervously asks just how many lives his master had to end for this, only for Diaden to morbidly joke that the kid's skull might be next. Trying to ignore the death threat, the young apprentice shifts the topic, genuinely curious if the old brute is actually a mage to be pulling items out of thin air. Absolutely baffled by the question, Diaden loudly mocks his student for being too ignorant to recognize basic subspace storage while the appraiser quietly begins inspecting the gems. Refusing to just take the insult, Xion snaps back, sparking another loud petty screaming match right over the glowing artifacts. Completely ignoring their bickering, the monocled elder closely examines a radiant stone, deeply impressed by the flawless top-tier quality of the entire haul. Cutting straight through the praise, Diaden leans forward with a serious glint in his eye, demanding to know exactly what this mountain of treasure is going to buy him. Pavilsa cautiously suggests paying in mana crystals, but the moment Dioden's hand drops to his hilt, the sweating elder quickly backpedals and waves it off as a joke. Realizing his usual currency won't cut it, the clan leader looks up and seriously asks what kind of payment the brute actually desires. Taking a relaxed stance with a steaming cup, Dioden casually demands a custom breastplate forged from the corpse of the wolf ant queen. Swirling the dark liquid in his glass, the veteran warrior prepares to add another hefty demand to the tab. He casually requests a subspace artifact as well, leaving our hero sweating nervously beside him at the sheer audacity of the order. Picking his ear in utter skepticism, Pavilsa points out the obvious flaw in the request, noting that the master already has endless storage and absolutely no need for armor. A massive hand suddenly clamps down on Xian as Dioden bluntly states the gear isn't for him. Yanking the fabric right over the kid's face mid-sip, the old brute declares that his foolish student will be the one wearing the items. Behind his glass lens, the appraiser's eye goes wide in sheer astonishment at this completely uncharacteristic display of generosity. Staring at the Xian, Pavilsa silently deduces that our boy must be incredibly valuable if a monster like Dioden is actually looking out for him. Making his decision, the clan leader turns his back to the pair and barks an order toward a massive set of double doors, calling out for someone named Kaylee. Heavy stone grinds against the floor as the ornate entrance slowly begins to swing open in response. Our hero looks up, his eyes widening in absolute awe as a new figure steps into the room. Thigh-high boots and a utility belt packed with glowing vials step through the threshold as a feminine voice answers the summons. The newcomer casually addresses the imposing elder as Grandpa, but our boy Xian is completely distracted, instantly stunned by just how gorgeous she is. Looking down at his granddaughter, Pavilsa inquires about a specific subspace bracelet she previously crafted. Holding up a finger, Kaylee clarifies that she actually made a gauntlet, keeping it safely tucked away due to its flawless enchantment. The clan leader immediately orders her to hand the precious item over to the boy, leaving the young enchanter completely outraged at the demand. Leaning back with a booming laugh, Dioden is highly amused to see the little girl has grown into her profession, though his sheer presence clearly terrifies her. The old brute openly praises her skills, noting that an enchanter is a remarkably rare and useful class even in Neo Soul. Sensing her hesitation, Pavilsa places a firm hand on her arm, silently insisting that she follow his instructions. He dismisses her from the tense room, instructing her to fetch the gauntlet and relay a message to someone named Noel for the breastplate. Begrudgingly accepting the order, she snaps at our hero to follow her, a command he eagerly obeys with a massive grin. The two of them step out into the sunlit streets of the cavern city, leaving the heavy atmosphere of the negotiation room behind. Glancing over her shoulder, the young woman can't help but ask how on earth he ended up traveling with a monster like that. Scratching his cheek awkwardly, our boy tries to play it cool, claiming he just ran into the geezer by chance and got roped into tagging along. That casual answer only makes her grab him by the shoulders and scream in his face, utterly baffled that he's managed to survive being dragged around by such a beast. Staring into her panicked eyes, a sudden realization dawns on Xian. Even as she stands there sweating in the street, his mind flashes to a terrifying vision of his master brutally tearing enemies apart barehanded, confirming that this poor girl suffers from the exact same PTSD he does. As she screams a desperate warning that the old man is a literal monster in human skin, our boy just silently agrees, because nobody on earth knows that horrifying truth better than him. Our hero stares up at the massive ornate stone doors blocking their path, asking if they've finally reached their destination. With a bright, prideful smile, the young enchanter eagerly confirms that this is indeed her domain. As the heavy doors swing open, she warns him to brace himself, boasting that he is about to witness a sight unlike anything he has ever seen in his life. The sheer scale of what lies beyond the threshold instantly leaves our boy completely speechless. Overwhelmed by the massive hoard of magical gear, he stammers out a question, prompting her to proudly declare that every single piece here is an absolute masterpiece forged by her own hands. She immediately shoves a dark strapped gauntlet right into his face, passionately geeking out over its adamantium frame and incredible auto-repair capabilities. That last feature makes Xian's eyes practically sparkle as he realizes the gear can literally mend its own damage. Eagerly confirming his theory, she adds that it also holds a fire attribute that could turn the weapon into an unimaginable monster if paired with the right core. Xian hesitates, asking if it's really okay for him to take something so valuable, while she reluctantly hugs the gauntlet to her chest, bound to hand it over only by her grandfather's strict orders. Adding a final warning that the item slot is strictly permanent, she watches our hero drool and reach out to claim his shiny new prize. But when he tries to pull the weapon away, the stubborn enchanter absolutely refuses to loosen her grip. A ridiculous tug-of-war breaks out right in the middle of the room as both of them lean back, desperately fighting for control of the masterpiece. This petty struggle quickly devolves into a full-blown screaming match, neither willing to surrender a single inch. Furious, she screams that she refuses to hand her precious child over to a nobody, but her grip finally slips, sending Zeon tumbling backward with the prize in hand. Clutching his new prize high in the air, our boy laughs like an absolute villain, shamelessly gloating that her precious masterpiece belongs to him now. However, before Bro can fully bask in his petty victory, a monstrous earth-shattering tremor violently shakes the entire workshop, instantly freezing both of them in their tracks as they stare up at the ceiling in pure shock. Completely misreading the room, Zeon awkwardly offers to return the stolen gauntlet, only for a terrified Kaylee to scream that her panic has absolutely nothing to do with his new toy. Her eyes wide with sheer terror, the young enchanter recognizes the deafening rumble as a warning cry from the Archelon, signaling the arrival of a very specific deadly enemy. As another explosive crash rocks the building, our boy braces himself against the shockwave, frantically demanding to know who exactly is attacking them. The young blacksmith is too paralyzed by dread to even answer, helplessly watching the ceiling as the relentless grinding tremors threaten to bring the whole structure down around them. Meanwhile, back in the ornate VIP lounge, Diadon and Pavilsa casually observe the crumbling ceiling as the violent shaking finally reaches their location. Unfazed by the crumbling architecture, the old man simply clicks his tongue, recognizing the disturbance and muttering about their attacker's sheer persistence. Outside the city walls, a ruthless pack of cloaked scavengers charges blindly through a massive dust storm, launching a full-scale high-speed assault on the giant turtle fortress. As they desperately dash up the stairs, our boy screams in pure disbelief at the word scavengers. He needs to know exactly what kind of lunatics would launch a full-scale assault on a giant monster. Kaylee explained that they are the infamous Black Shark Clan, a ruthless syndicate led by a D-rank awakener and packed with elite killers. She warns him that these aren't just ordinary thieves looking for loot. They are bloodthirsty psychopaths who slaughter without a second thought. The sheer mention of a D-rank threat leaves Zeon completely baffled just as they skid to a halt in front of the VIP lounge. Without wasting another second, the panicked blacksmith throws the heavy doors open, screaming for her grandfather. Trying to sound the alarm, she quickly realizes that Pavilsa and Diadon are already completely aware of the impending bloodbath. Desperate, she begs the elder to move the Archelon, only for him to grimly admit that outrunning these killers is impossible. Cracking his knuckles, the old master declares that their only option left is to stand their ground and fight. Ready to act, the young enchanter immediately volunteers to rally the city's defense forces, but Diadon sharply cuts her off. Dropping heavily back onto the couch with a fresh cup of tea, Diadon casually announces that they won't be needing the guards for this one. This sudden shift to a relaxed attitude leaves Kaylee completely speechless. Shattering the quiet, Diadon suddenly barks at our boy at the top of his lungs, making the startled Zeon flinch and snap to attention like a terrified recruit. Diadon doesn't miss a beat, casually dropping a massive bombshell by declaring that our hero is going to handle the incoming attack himself, leaving the poor kid pointing at his own chest in absolute wide-eyed disbelief. Diadon screams at our boy to earn his expensive new treasure and pay off his debt, while Zeon absolutely loses his mind over being expected to solo a D-rank monster. Flailing in absolute panic, Bro screams back at his master in utter disbelief, completely baffled as to how he's supposed to survive this sudden death sentence. Cutting right through the hysterical meltdown, Diadon leans in with a smug smirk and flat-out asks if this guy is actually scared. That single question strikes a nerve, leaving Zeon wide-eyed and speechless. We cut to a desolate, wind-swept wasteland, and our hero is standing right in the middle of it. Frustration boils over as he curses his own stupidity, the howling wind drowning out his complaints. The elder's sharp words had played him perfectly, manipulating his pride to get him out here. Zeon forces himself to breathe, knowing he doesn't have the luxury of throwing a tantrum. He lets out a long, slow exhale, letting the anger wash away as pure focus takes over. He calculates that he only has 5 minutes before the real enemy forces arrive. Slipping on the enchanted gauntlet Kaylee made for him, his mind races to formulate a strategy against a superior awakener. His left eye flares with a brilliant golden light, determination hardening his features as he prepares to punch above his weight class. Meanwhile, high above the swirling dust, Diadon crosses his arms while the old man questions the wisdom of this brutal test. Standing atop the massive stone beast, the old man points out that leaving an E-rank kid to face a bloodthirsty clan alone is practically a death sentence. With a harsh tone, Diadon states plainly that if the apprentice fails here, there won't be a rescue mission. Pavilsa watches the chaos calmly, silently acknowledging that even a tiger cub can be torn apart by wild dogs if it never learns to bite back. Still, with a sharp glint in his eye, the elder waits to see if this little cub is finally ready to bare his fangs and unleash hell. Breaking the silence, Pavilsa's voice echoes down from the high ledge, catching our hero completely off guard. Cupping his hands, the old man delivers one final, emphatic piece of advice before the chaos begins. Down below, Zeon hangs onto every blurred word, absorbing a secret that could mean the difference between life and death. Tearing through the thick dust clouds, a squad of ruthless black shark riders finally intercepts them, already casually debating which of their victims they should capture and sell off for profit. Captain Gawain wastes no time, roaring a bloodthirsty command to butcher the group and feed them to the beasts. Driven by pure malice, the masked riders spur their mounts into a frenzied high-speed sprint. Battle cries pierce the howling wind as the fanatical scavengers hype themselves up for a slaughter. Blinded by bloodlust, the entire raiding party gallops straight toward the colossal dormant rock creature. But the assault comes to a violent, abrupt halt as the captain is suddenly thrown forward off his mount. Without warning, the solid ground beneath them gives way, plunging a rider into a massive swirling sinkhole. The captain's bloodthirsty rage instantly evaporates into sheer panic as he witnesses the impossible. A colossal fissure tears through the desert floor, swallowing the charging cavalry whole, as desperate screams to retreat echo from the depths. The devastation is absolute, the shifting sands burying the attackers before they can even draw their blades. Sprawled in the dirt, Captain realizes the sand itself is moving against them just as a girl rushes over to check on his condition. Panic instantly morphs into rage as the bandaged captain screams at his red-masked subordinate, accusing her of missing a colossal trap while she frantically swears the area was clear. But before she can even finish her defense, Zeon materializes out of thin air and locks her in a deadly grip. A chill runs down the masked woman's spine as a single glowing eye pierces the shadows right beside her ear. The captain loses his mind, roaring at the intruder to take his hands off his subordinate. His warning comes too late. A colossal spike of solid rock erupts from the earth, violently impaling Clang. Gawain freezes mid-lunge, his face draining of color as a gruesome shower of crimson rains down on the sand. Behind the horrific display, our boy stands completely unfazed, letting the carnage speak for itself. Wiping the splatter from his cheek, Zeon locks eyes with the captain and coldly calls for his next victim. Driven by explosive rage, another attacker flashes to Zeon's blind spot, bringing down a glowing red blade. At the last possible second, Zeon slips away, leaving the devastating strike to carve nothing but dirt. Not giving our boy a single second to breathe, the attacker unleashes a colossal crimson shockwave that violently rips the earth apart, swallowing the battlefield in a blinding explosion. As the debris clears, the attacker's bloodlust instantly shifts into utter disbelief. Standing perfectly still in the center of the destruction, Zeon hasn't just survived the blast. He completely neutralized it. But the assault is far from over. The bandaged captain roars for his heavy hitter Masamoto as he leaps high into the air to strike our hero from above. Suspended mid-air, the scavenger realizes his fatal mistake as a massive pillar of rock surges upward to impale him. Dropping from the sky to capitalize on the trap, Masamoto brings his glowing red blade crashing down with devastating force. Furious at being outplayed, Gawain lunges forward with a desperate punch, screaming at Zeon for using cheap tricks. The impact triggers a massive explosion of earth, completely swallowing the battlefield in a blinding dust cloud. As the debris settles, the captain freezes in horror. His striking arm is completely immobilized by a swirling vortex of sand. Thrashing against the earthen snare, Gawain furiously demands to know how long our hero has been hiding these petty illusions. Refusing to be held down, the enraged scavenger shatters the trap, channeling a blinding red aura into his fist for a brutal counterattack. Realizing they are dealing with a manipulator, the remaining clan members coordinate a deadly pincer strike to crush Zeon from both sides. But before the trap can close, Zeon already buries a devastating explosive hook straight into Masamoto. Bloodied but completely unfazed, our boy stares through the settling dust, his glowing white eyes radiating pure menace. The brutal beatdown is suddenly interrupted. He recalls what Pavilsa said. His voice echoes from the high ledge, demanding the apprentice's attention. The old elder accurately points out that Zeon isn't struggling with the enemy's rank, but rather his own hesitation to take a human life. Standing beside Diadon, the monocled elder firmly orders the boy to erase that hesitation, declaring that these scavengers are no longer human. Confused by the harsh statement, Zeon glances up at the towering rock formation, prompting Pavilsa to double down on his grim assessment. The elder reveals the sickening truth about the Black Shark clan, detailing how they torture and massacre innocent people purely for sport. As the elder screams that these bastards have already claimed over 200 victims, taking sick pride in slaughtering women and children. Our boy grits his teeth in absolute fury. Back to his sense, accepting the grim reality of the battlefield, Zeon draws his weapon in a blur of motion, his eyes burning with a fierce white light. On the other side of the battlefield, Gawain completely loses his mind, erupting in a blinding red aura as he charges forward in a blind rage. The scavenger captain closes the distance in a flash, his single crimson eye locked onto his target with pure unadulterated hatred. But before he can even land a strike, the earth beneath him violently erupts, impaling the charging monster on a cluster of jagged rock spikes. With a simple thrust of his open hand, Zeon unleashes a massive shockwave that swats the captain out of the air, slamming him into the dirt with bone-crushing force. Refusing to stay down, the battered scavenger thrashes against the ground, screaming at the top of his lungs that these petty tricks won't be enough to kill him. Standing perfectly still amidst the swirling dust, Zeon silently listens as his broken opponent spits out a string of increasingly graphic and desperate threats. Gawain promises to butcher his family and feed him to monsters, only to be abruptly cut off by a single, chilling word from the boy. Towering over the pathetic scavenger, Xian coldly asks if he is finally done talking. That sheer, suffocating pressure radiating from the kid causes the captain to freeze, his bloodshot eye widening in absolute terror. Seeing the how fight is unfolding, even Diaden's smirk flashes. Our boy stares at the trembling captain and flawlessly echoes the man's own insult right back at him, ready to deliver the final blow. Trembling with rage and dripping with sweat, Gawain spits out a bitter laugh at our boy's audacity to label him as trash, but the words instantly rip open a fresh wound. The captain assessing the situation, how his subordinate taken down, first Clay, then Mashimoto, brutally impaled and left to bleed out in the unforgiving wasteland. Gawain crushes the dirt in his fist, fiercely declaring that his respected comrades wouldn't fall to some half-baked amateur. That bravado instantly crumbles when he locks eyes with our boy, who stands dead center in a raging vortex of sand with his pupils glowing a piercing ruthless white, leaving the terrified captain internally screaming. Just what is this guy? As if to answer, our hero unleashes a colossal dragon forged entirely from the swirling sand, its monstrous roaring vortex forcing the overwhelmed captain to brace against the devastating winds. Refusing to cower, the D-rank awakener forces his own energy to the surface, igniting a violent red aura around his body. Furious and desperate, he screams at his opponent to stop hiding behind cheap elemental tricks and reveal his actual strength. Answering the challenge to fight like a true awakener, our boy instantly closes the distance in a blur of motion. Bracing for impact, the clan leader roars into the wind, demanding a head-on clash. Channeling all his rage, the captain unleashes a massive swirling vortex of destructive crimson energy. Slamming his fist directly into the earth, he triggers a violent shockwave and dares the kid to keep coming. Suddenly, the veteran's bloodshot eyes widen in absolute shock as his attack hits nothing but empty air. Staring into the settling dust cloud, panic sets in as he realizes his target has completely vanished from the battlefield. Before Gawain can even track the movement, a deadly blur closes in from his blind spot, leaving him completely defenseless. With a sickening crack, Xian's blade connects, shattering Gawain's defenses from behind. But instead of a clean kill, a chilling realization washes over the young swordsman's face. This wasn't a blind spot at all. A menacing smirk creeps across the syndicate leader's bandaged face as he confirms the trap, welcoming the boy right into his lethal range. Without a second of hesitation, the D-rank awakener gripped the Xian and plant him into the ground. Pinned to the dirt, our guy grits his teeth in pure frustration, cursing his own miscalculation against a seasoned brawler. Engulfed in a roaring crimson aura, the enraged captain pulls back his fist, lecturing the kid that a single misstep on the battlefield is fatal. Staring up at the impending doom, Xian realizes too late that he walked straight into a masterfully laid snare. His eyes burning with unyielding wrath, the veteran vows to carve his vengeance into the boy's flesh, dedicating this execution to his fallen comrade Mashimoto. An overwhelming blast of red energy erupts from the impact, pinning Xian into the ground. Refusing to let up, the clan leader charges forward, screaming out the names of Clay and Alaya as he unleashes a relentless barrage. Strike after brutal strike rains down on our hero, each blow fueled by the grief of losing Maraz, Shiveria and Kyle. Convinced he has completely broken his opponent, the captain declares that no amount of elemental tricks can save the boy now that he's caught. While the veteran commands him to curse his own weakness in his final moments, suddenly the kid's gloved hand holds the veteran hands. Brushing off the unexpected resistance, the enraged captain brings his fist down in a devastating high-speed strike, fully intending to obliterate our boy right then and there. But the guaranteed kill completely whiffs, leaving the stunned captain screaming in absolute disbelief as he realizes our hero has somehow vanished from his grasp. He is left holding nothing but an empty piece of armor as a vortex of sand whips up around him. Shock washes over the veteran as he realizes the kid slipped out of his own gear just to break the hold. Before the syndicate leader can recover, a bare hand bursts from the dust storm, driving a lightning-fast counterattack straight at him. Connecting with explosive force, the strike blasts the D-rank powerhouse backward into the debris. Clutching his bleeding face, the captain curses his own momentary panic for letting his prey slip away. Examining the fresh wound, a sudden revelation dawns on the seasoned fighter. The sheer destructive momentum from earlier is gone. Deflecting the next volley of strikes, the veteran deduces that the lost gauntlet was the true source of the boy's monstrous strength. Convinced he has unraveled the mystery of this elemental magic, the clan leader's arrogance comes roaring back. Engulfed in a blazing crimson aura, the captain charges forward, roaring that he has completely seen through his opponent's pathetic tricks. Pulling back a fist radiating with lethal energy, he declares that a stripped-down mage is nothing but dead meat. To him, there is absolutely no way a fragile magic user can survive a point-blank brawl against a martial expert. Even as the glowing red fist closes in, a chilling, sinister smirk spreads across our hero's face. Without warning, a colossal spike of hardened sand erupts from the earth, violently impaling the charging captain straight through the back. The veteran's eyes go wide with absolute horror, his brain short-circuiting as he realizes he was baited into a massive blind spot. Panting heavily but radiating a terrifying new aura, Xian flashes a mocking grin at Gawain for finally dropping his guard. Gripping the jagged earth tearing through his chest, a furious Gawain thrashes wildly, his expression conveying absolute outrage at Xian repeating the exact same cheap trick. But mid-rant, The color completely drains from the captain's face as a horrifying detail finally clicks into place. Staring into the swirling vortex around them, he realizes the sheer crushing force behind this elemental magic makes absolutely no sense. Through the blinding dust storm, the terrifying truth hits him. This monster is generating this much raw power without any amplifier at all. Before the broken D rank can process the impossible, our hero steps out of the storm and put his hand to the ground. Coughing up blood, the defeated clan leader stares blankly ahead, his mind completely shattering under the weight of his own miscalculation. Tumbling backward into a massive, churning crater of earth, he finally understands that he isn't fighting a simple mage. Jagged tendrils of hardened rock rise from the abyss, proving that this boy doesn't just cast spells. He commands the very world around him. Surrounded by inescapable death, every instinct in the veteran's body screams in pure, unadulterated terror at the godlike display. With a deafening roar, a colossal tidal wave of earth crashes down, completely obliterating the Black Shark captain once and for all. Miles away from the slaughter, Pavilsa watches the aftermath unfold, his hand trembling as he processes the sheer scale of the boy's elemental control. Standing beside Diadon, the monocled elder gasps in absolute awe, realizing that the young swordsman has turned the entire battlefield into his own personal weapon. Even as he watches the settling dust, Pavilsa's mind flashes to the menacing D rank, acknowledging that a direct clash with such a seasoned killer would have been suicide. He can't stop thinking about the brilliant tactic, deducing out loud that our boy intentionally feigned weakness to bait the arrogant veteran into a fatal opening. It absolutely blows his mind that this guy didn't need decades of grueling combat experience to execute the trap. He just instinctively weaponized the kind of split-second judgment that most veterans die trying to learn. The fact that Bro orchestrated this ruthless, high IQ trap right in the absolute thick of a chaotic bloodbath just proves he's a completely different breed of monster. Shaking off the shock, the monocled elder mutters a heavy confession, openly admitting he was completely wrong to dismiss our hero as a mere tiger cub. Still reeling from the brutal display of power, Pavilsa slowly turns his head to look at his silent cloaked companion. Looking at the veteran swordsman, the old man demands to know where Diadon managed to find a monster capable of such terrifying carnage.